Hi guys. Tonight we step back into a world that wakes with the rooster's cry and smells faintly of bread, smoke, and damp earth. You stand in a medieval village where every sound feels amplified in the cool dawn air. A dog barks somewhere beyond the low stone wall, and you can almost see the curl of chimney smoke rise against a pale sky. For a moment, the quiet is beautiful, but then you remember. You probably would not survive this for more than a few weeks. Still, it is a wonderful place to visit, especially from the safety of your blanket. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights. You open your eyes to the cool grey light of dawn. The air is heavy with the scent of wood smoke and damp straw. The rooster's crow cuts through the haze, echoing across a cluster of thatched roofs. You lie on a straw-stuffed mattress, its ticking made of rough linen, and feel the faint scratch of chaff against your skin. Outside, someone's already at work, chopping wood with a steady rhythm. This is your morning in a medieval village, and it begins early because everyone's day does. The sun creeps slowly over fields that look more like patchwork quilts than farmland, small strips owned and shared among neighbours. You hear the faint jangle of a bell from a distant cow, and soon after, the low murmur of voices as villagers gather near the well. The water there tastes faintly of metal, but it is life itself. Most people in your time rise before the church bell rings for prime, the early morning prayer. Time, after all, isn't measured by clocks but by sound bells, roosters, footsteps, and the pull of the seasons. As you step outside, your breath meets the cold air. It is smoky from last night's fires, mixed with the earthy aroma of manure and wet soil. You look around and see small houses built close together, their walls of wattle and daub branches and mud, really, but they hold warmth. The roofs sag a little, heavy with thatch that harbours birds, spiders, and sometimes the occasional mouse. People joke that the roof is alive, and they are not wrong. Your neighbours are already busy. The baker's apprentice trots toward the communal oven with dough wrapped in cloth. The blacksmith's fire crackles faintly, and you can almost hear the first strike of his hammer. Even the animals are restless hens scratching, pigs snuffling through discarded peelings, a goat bleating for attention. This early hour hums with quiet urgency, as if the whole village exhales at once and begins again. The average medieval person spends most of life within a few miles of home. You might never see a city, never hear a language other than your dialect, and never read a single word. Yet your world is rich in texture, smell, sound, and rhythm. The day opens with labor, but it also brings connection. People exchange greetings as they pass the well, gossip about last night's storm, or the rumor that the Lord's tax collector is coming early this year. Small talk, after all, is older than anyone can remember. A mainstream fact about your morning. People in medieval Europe rose and slept according to daylight, not the clock. Sleep often came in two parts, first sleep and second sleep, divided by an hour or two of quiet wakefulness around midnight. During that time, people prayed, talked, or even visited neighbors in the dark. You might do the same tonight, when the story reaches evening again. A more unusual tidbit hides in the corners of this morning scene. Many villagers believed that roosters crowed not just because of dawn, but because they sensed the struggle between night spirits and the rising Sunday. Some whispered that if a rooster failed to crow, it meant a witch was near. Historians still debate whether such beliefs were widespread superstition or just local tales told to children. Either way, it makes the rooster's cry sound a little more important, doesn't it? The scent of baking bread wafts through the air. The communal oven is the heart of the village, its fire never truly going out. You walk closer, feeling its heat spill into the cool morning. Women gather with baskets lined with cloth, each carrying dough prepared before dawn. There is laughter here, and the easy rhythm of gossip. You might hear talk about the miller's new ox or about a merchant passing through with strange spices from across the sea. Even in a world that seems small, curiosity stretches far beyond the fields. Nearby, a boy chases a goose down the lane, barefoot and shrieking with delight. You smile, though you know that same boy will spend the afternoon turning soil or tending sheep. Childhood is short here, but not joyless. Everything feels vivid, present, because every sense matters. You walk on, your feet sinking into mud mixed with straw. The morning sun strikes the dewy grass and the church bell tolls again, slow, deliberate, the sound of time itself. A flock of starlings scatters from the bell tower in a sudden black shimmer. You pause, feeling the echo through the ground, a low hum that seems to settle in your chest. People begin to move toward their daily work. The reeve, a sort of village overseer, checks the fields for damage from last night's frost. The women fetch water, their laughter carrying down the lane. The smell of dung might sting your nose, but mingled with it is the sweetness of hay and the sharp, comforting scent of smoke. This world is alive in every direction. You catch sight of the manor house on the hill, a pale shape beyond the hedges. Its windows glint faintly, a reminder that power lives above you, both literally and socially. Inside, the Lord's servants are stirring too, though their mourning involves linen sheets and silver pitchers instead of rough wool and wooden bowls. Still, both Lord and peasant share the same sunrise, the same need to begin again. A sudden gust of wind sends a flutter of straw into the air, and you pull your cloak tighter. You glance up to see the church cross outlined against the sky. Faith is everywhere, woven through sound and habit. Every bell, every prayer, even the rhythm of work feels shaped by it. The village itself orbits around the church like planets around a Sunday. You walk back toward your small cottage, where a pot of thin porridge waits over the fire. It is plain but warm. You sit down, take a breath, and listen again to the quiet bustle outside. The day has properly begun, and somehow, despite the hard work ahead, there's a peace to it all, a calm that comes from knowing your place in the rhythm of things. And as the morning unfolds, you realize that even in this rough, cold, and smoky world, there is beauty. In the clatter of buckets, in the scent of bread, in the slow waking of a community that depends on each other to survive. The rooster crows again, and this time, you almost feel grateful. You splash icy water on your face and gasp. The chill cuts through your sleepiness like a knife, but it is the only kind of freshness you will get today. You are standing at a wooden basin outside your cottage, your reflection rippling in the bucket. There is no mirror, only a hint of your shape in the metal rim. Your hands are red from the cold. This is your morning routine in the Middle Ages, simple but strangely grounding. The water comes from the communal well, drawn before sunrise. It carries a faint taste of earth, sometimes moss, sometimes iron. You rub it over your face, neck, and wrists. Soap exists, yes, but not quite as you know it. It is made from animal fat and lye, and its harshness can strip your skin raw. Only the wealthy use it often, sometimes perfumed with rose or lavender. Most villagers prefer a scrub of sand, ashes, or herbs like sage and thyme. It cleans enough, and the scent covers what the bath cannot. Bathing is a complicated affair. Full immersion in water is rare. You might wash your hands and face daily, but a proper bath is a luxury. Water has to be fetched, heated, poured, and reused. Some inns have public bathhouses, where people soak together in steaming wooden tubs, filled with scented herbs. You imagine the warmth and the chatter, a mix of laughter, gossip, and the occasional business deal. But in a small village like yours, washing means a basin, a rag, and a lot of patience. Your hair is oily, your nails dark with soil from yesterday's work. Still, people are not as filthy as modern myths suggest. They change their linen often because it touches the skin directly. Clean linen means health and decency. Even peasants know this. You pull on a fresh shift, scratchy but fragrant from drying near the hearth. The faint smoke smell is comforting, a reminder that fire keeps you alive in more ways than one. You reach for a comb carved from bone. The teeth are uneven but effective. Lice are a fact of life here, but combing helps. You might sprinkle rosemary or vinegar into your hair, or rub it with animal grease mixed with herbs to keep pests away. It sounds unpleasant, but the scent is not bad at all. In fact, many medieval people carry small pouches of dried lavender or mint to freshen themselves, a kind of portable perfume for the hard-working class. The idea of hygiene is different but not absent. People link cleanliness to moral virtue, though not always to physical health. Washing your hands before eating, for instance, is a habit enforced by both religion and manners. Dirt might cling to your skin, but sin clings to the soul, and water purifies both. In monasteries, washing becomes almost sacred. The monks bathe before holy days, trimming nails and beards with quiet precision. It is said that Saint Bernard scolded those who bathed too often, calling it vanity, while others argued that neglecting cleanliness invited disease. Historians still argue whether bathing habits declined dramatically after the Black Death, or whether people simply grew more private about it. You glance at your neighbour across the lane, a woman with her sleeves rolled up, scrubbing clothes in a wooden tub. Her hands are raw, her arms flecked with soap bubbles that catch the morning light. She sings under her breath, an old ballad about springtime and lost love. Washing day is backbreaking work, but also social time. Children run between the tubs, splashing each other while mothers exchange news. Somewhere nearby, a baby wails, and the rhythm of life carries on. Inside your cottage, you step to the hearth. The air smells faintly of last night's stew. You heat a little water in a small pot and use it to rinse your mouth. Toothpaste in your world is made of crushed salt, charcoal, or ground herbs. It tastes awful, but it works. The wealthy might use clove oil or wine to rinse. Teeth are rarely white, but surprisingly strong. You smile into your reflection on a pot's surface and shrug. Nobody here is worried about dental perfection. Your bed, if you can call it that, is a straw mattress stuffed into a wooden frame. You pull back the rough linen sheet to air it out. Fleas love warmth and darkness, so this daily airing is your small act of rebellion against nature. You shake out the blanket, the one woven from coarse wool. It smells of lanolin and smoke. You think of the sheep it came from, grazing on the far hill, and the hands that spun its fibers. Every object in your home has a story, every scent, a memory. In towns, the wealthy start their morning differently. Their servants pour water into silver basins, and towels are embroidered with family crests. Perfume bottles gleam on shelves, filled with rosewater or citrus essence imported from the Mediterranean. You can almost imagine the soft rustle of silk gowns, the glint of jewelry in morning light. But here, in your humble cottage, the rhythm is slower and quieter. The only luxury you have is time to notice the small beauty of things, the curl of steam from your breath, the rough texture of wood beneath your fingers. A mainstream historical fact: soap making was already a skilled trade in the Middle Ages. Town records from places like Marseille and York list entire guilds of soap makers who guarded their recipes closely. They used animal fat, ash, and aromatic oils. Sometimes, soap was so valuable that it was sold in blocks like gold. It was even exported across borders. A quirkier tidbit: people sometimes believed that washing too much could weaken the body by opening the pores to evil air. In colder months, many avoided baths entirely, preferring dry rubs with linen cloths or herbal powders. There were even rumors that Queen Elizabeth I bathed only once a month, though that is centuries later and likely exaggerated. The water in your basin grows cloudy. You toss it into the mud outside, watching it soak into the earth. The act feels symbolic somehow, a small cleansing both of body and spirit. The sun is higher now, and the first true warmth touches your face. Someone nearby starts to ring the bell for morning prayers, and the echo drifts through the village. You take a deep breath and feel strangely refreshed, not in the way of hot showers or scented soap, but in a quieter, more grounded sense. You are clean enough to face the day, and that is all anyone can ask here. Your hands smell faintly of rosemary and ash. You wipe them on your tunic and step outside, ready for breakfast. The path is damp beneath your feet, but the world is wide awake. In this moment, you realize that cleanliness, even in its roughest form, carries comfort. The splash of cold water, the scent of herbs, the rhythm of simple tasks, it all soothes the senses. The medieval morning might be harsh, but it teaches you something modern life often forgets. Sometimes feeling human begins with a single drop of water on your skin. You sit by the hearth, your stomach softly rumbling as the morning light deepens. Breakfast is calling, though in this world it looks nothing like your own. There is no coffee to jolt you awake, no buttered toast glowing golden from a toaster. Instead, you find comfort in something humbler, earthier, and far more filling than it first appears. The pot over the fire simmers gently, releasing a smell both savory and familiar. It is pottage, the backbone of peasant life. A thick stew made from grains, peas, and whatever vegetables survived the night. You stir it with a wooden spoon, watching the steam rise in thin ribbons. Each bubble feels like a heartbeat, steady and reliable. The bread beside it is dense and dark, baked from rye and barley rather than soft white flour. You tear a piece off and dunk it into the pot, feeling the warmth soak into your fingers. Across the lane, a cockerel struts proudly past a group of children, who laugh and chase after him. Breakfast time in the village is noisy but communal. You hear the scrape of bowls, the clank of wooden spoons, the chatter of families greeting the day together. A dog barks for scraps. Somewhere, someone begins to whistle an old tune about summer fields and good harvests. For those who work the land, food is not a luxury. It is fuel. A full belly means a productive morning. Most peasants eat twice a day, sometimes 3 times if the harvest has been kind. The morning meal is simple: bread, ale, maybe a bit of cheese if you are lucky. The ale, weak and cloudy, is safer than water. It hums faintly with sweetness and carries the taste of barley. Children drink it too, for everyone needs hydration, and no one trusts a stagnant stream. In contrast, life in the manor begins with abundance. The lord and his household eat at long tables laden with meats, eggs, and honeyed bread. You can almost smell the roasted fish and hear the clatter of silver plates. Servants move like shadows, pouring wine or ale into polished cups. This is the world of privilege, though even here, taste is bound by the seasons. No strawberries in winter, no citrus unless shipped from faraway lands and priced like treasure. Historical records suggest that breakfast was often viewed with suspicion among the wealthy. Some church leaders believed it indulgent to eat too early, as fasting was seen as a sign of discipline. Still, farmers and laborers could not afford such luxury of restraint. Their bodies demanded energy, and their faith adapted to practicality. God, they would say, surely understands hunger. A curious little custom existed among travelers and craftsmen. They carried a round of bread and a lump of cheese tied in cloth, known as a knob end. It was both lunch and insurance against bad luck. Breaking bread on the road was considered an act of protection, a quiet blessing against thieves or hunger. Food was never just food here. It was part of ritual, gratitude, and survival. Not every morning was plentiful. Some years the harvest failed, and hunger sat like a cold fog over the village. Families stretched flour with acorns or ground peas into paste to make rough loaves. You can imagine the bitter taste, the effort to pretend it is the same as before. Yet, even in lean times, people shared. A neighbor might lend a handful of grain or offer broth from their pot. The memory of hunger was never far away, and generosity was its antidote. A well-documented custom reveals that villagers often gathered near the hearth for every meal, not just to eat but to connect. The fire's warmth was both physical and social. Meals were storytelling time. You might hear a tale of a saint's miracle, a bit of gossip about who courted whom, or the retelling of a long-ago flood that changed the course of a nearby river. Every bite carried history. Meanwhile, in monasteries, The day's first meal was eaten in near silence. Monks sat in rows, heads bowed, as one brother read aloud from scripture or the lives of the saints. The food was plain bread, beans, perhaps a boiled egg, but the act of eating was contemplative, almost meditative. The silence was not oppressive, it was calming, a rhythm of thought and nourishment intertwined. You take another bite of bread, feeling the crust scrape against your teeth. It tastes hearty and alive, rich with the grain that came from your own soil. For a moment, you close your eyes. The warmth of the fire, the chatter outside, the scent of wood smoke, it all folds into something deeply human. Life is hard, yes, but never entirely bleak. The simplicity of this meal carries a quiet joy. Researchers still wonder how taste shaped social identity in these centuries. Was it the ingredients or the rituals around them that defined class? The distinction between coarse bread and white loaf, between ale and spiced wine, between shared bowl and private plate, each reflected more than status. They revealed who you were allowed to be. Even today, you can sense that echo in every meal that feels like home. And then there are the odd details that make you smile. Some cooks believed that tossing salt over your shoulder after spilling it could chase away evil spirits. Others thought cutting bread with a knife would bring bad luck if done on a Sunday. Food and superstition blended so naturally that no one questioned it. After all, when life is uncertain, why not give every crumb a little meaning? The pot is nearly empty now. You scrape the bottom and pour what remains into a smaller bowl. Outside, the sun climbs higher, spilling gold over the rooftops. The villagers begin their work, their laughter and shouts mingling with the cries of animals. You sip the last of your ale and feel the heaviness in your stomach settle into something warm. It is not luxury that makes this meal comforting. It is rhythm, the small repetition of gestures that mark the start of every day. Stirring, breaking, sharing, tasting. In a world without alarms or screens, these moments anchor you. The medieval morning ends, not with haste, but with quiet readiness. You rise, stretch, and step toward the fields, carrying the taste of bread and smoke on your tongue. The day has begun. You stand before a small wooden chest, the faint smell of cedar rising as you lift the lid. Inside lies your entire wardrobe, folded neatly in soft layers of linen and wool. There are no mirrors to admire yourself in, no closets packed with color. Each piece has been hand-stitched, repaired, and worn countless times, yet every thread holds meaning. Dressing, in this age, is not vanity but language. You begin with the base layer, a long linen shift that touches your ankles. It is smooth against your skin, a barrier between you and the coarse wool that will come next. For a peasant, linen is precious. It absorbs sweat, keeps you cool in summer, and warm in winter. The weave is uneven, and you can feel the slight ridges where the thread thickens. You slip it on, tugging at the sleeves, and tie a thin cord around your waist. Simple, practical, and clean. Over it, you pull a tunic of faded brown wool. It smells faintly of sheep, lanolin, and hearth smoke. The cloth is scratchy but strong, woven by hand and dyed with roots or bark. The color is dull because bright dyes cost money: madder for red, woad for blue, saffron for yellow. Only the wealthy can afford brilliance. In this world, color is currency, and every shade says something about who you are. You tie your belt, made from leather worn smooth over years. From it hangs your knife, the tool you use for everything from slicing bread to cutting twine. It is both necessity and symbol. A person without a knife feels half-dressed, unprepared for the day's labor. Beside it dangles a pouch of small items, a wooden comb, a few coins, a piece of cloth scented with rosemary. Records from the time show that clothing laws were strict in many places. These were called sumptuary laws, rules that dictated what people could wear based on social rank. A farmer could not dress like a knight, nor a merchant like a noble. The idea was to preserve order through fabric, to make sure everyone looked like who they were supposed to be. In some towns, the color purple was reserved exclusively for royalty, and anyone else caught wearing it faced fines or public shame. You glance across the lane and see your neighbor, a widow, adjusting her coif, a simple linen cap that hides her hair. Married women rarely go bareheaded in public. Hair is considered a mark of modesty and propriety, though how tightly it must be covered depends on custom. The cap sits snug, tied under the chin, and frames her face with quiet dignity. You nod as you pass. She smiles back, her hands busy with the morning's mending. In contrast, imagine the nobility dressing for the same day. Their garments shimmer with silk, velvet, and fur. The weight of status literally hangs on their shoulders. Servants lace them into fitted bodices, fasten rows of buttons or ties, and adjust elaborate collars stiffened with starch. You can almost hear the rustle of fine fabrics, the faint clink of jewelry. A noble's morning routine could last an hour, while yours takes minutes. Yet, oddly, you feel freer. One of those stranger details from medieval fashion is that buttons were often decorative rather than functional. Clothes were tied or laced together instead. It was said that in some regions people carried their best tunics on their arms to keep them clean until reaching church. Others slept in their underclothes to save time dressing in the cold morning. Daily life made pragmatists of everyone. As you tighten your cloak against the wind, you think about how fabric connects people across class and distance. Wool from your village might travel to a distant port, traded for salt or wine. The spinning wheel hums in cottages everywhere, a steady rhythm in the background of medieval life. Women and children spend hours twisting fiber, singing softly as they work. Each thread represents patience, care, and endurance. Scholars continue to question how far individuality reached through dress in these centuries. Did a bright ribbon or an embroidered cuff signal rebellion, or simply taste? Evidence from burial garments and preserved cloth fragments shows that even the poor sought beauty wherever possible. A hidden stitch of colored thread, a pattern sewn where only the wearer could see, it was a quiet defiance against anonymity. You slide your feet into leather shoes, hardened by years of walking. They fit imperfectly but protect you from the stones and mud outside. Some people wrap their feet in cloth or go barefoot in summer. But today the air bites sharply. You tie the laces and step toward the door. The floor creaks beneath you, and a wisp of straw clings to your hem. You brush it away with a smile. Before stepping out, you glance once more around your small home. The folded garments on the chest, the needle and thread on the stool. The faint hum of life outside all of it forms a portrait of resilience. Every piece of clothing, no matter how plain, tells a story of work, resourcefulness, and quiet pride. A curious record from Paris mentions that laundresses sang while washing noble garments in the river, claiming the rhythm of the song softened stains faster. Whether superstition or just tradition, it reminds you that sound and labor often traveled hand in hand. Even your own morning dressing carries rhythm. The soft rustle of linen, the tug of wool, the faint clink of your belt buckle. You step outside, feeling the air cling to your clothes. The fabric is heavy with warmth and scent, smoke, lanolin, and a trace of earth. Around you, other villagers are emerging, adjusting tunics and tightening belts. The colors blend into a tapestry of browns, greys, and faded greens. It is a modest palette, yet when the sunlight catches it just right, it glows softly, like the heart of the world itself. Dressing is done. You are ready to face the day not as a lord or scholar, but as someone grounded in the rhythm of necessity. Every knot you tied, every piece you layered, connects you to centuries of lives lived through fabric. You take a slow breath, your cloak fluttering against your knees, and step toward the lane where the day is waiting. You step outside into the heart of the village. The first breath hits you like a memory, damp air mixed with the smell of livestock, ashes, and baking bread. The street beneath your feet is not quite a street, more a mixture of earth and straw churned by carts and boots. You walk carefully, because puddles here are never just rainwater. The sun filters through a pale haze, touching rooftops made of thatch, some patched with moss. Children chase each other around piles of firewood, laughing despite the chill. Geese waddle through the mud, honking like self-important guards. You smile at the sight, even as you sidestep their droppings. This is the living pulse of the Middle Ages, the mingled chaos of life, work and rumour. The first sound that greets you is the call of the market crier. His voice carries through the air like a song you already know. Fresh fish from the river, bread baked at dawn. It is not an announcement so much as a rhythm of reassurance. The market will open soon, and everyone will be there, even if only to look, to gossip, or to dream of things they cannot afford. You pass a row of cottages. From one, smoke rises steadily through a cracked chimney. From another comes the rhythmic clang of metal, a smith hammering out a horseshoe. The sparks leap in the dim morning light, gold against grey. He pauses to wipe his brow, nods at you, then returns to his work. Every blow rings like punctuation in a language you understand without words. It might surprise you that medieval streets, though muddy and crowded, were not completely lawless. Town regulations existed, enforced by constables or watchmen who patrolled after dark. Fines were given for dumping refuse too near a well or letting animals roam loose. Written town charters from places like York and Bruges describe penalties for throwing chamber pot waste from windows during daylight. Apparently, if you did it at night, you only had to shout a warning first. "Look out below!" And that counted as courtesy. The smells can be overwhelming. Smoke, manure, yeast, and sweat mingling into something oddly familiar, almost comforting. You pass a pig rooting happily near a puddle, its snout caked in mud. Pigs were often the unofficial cleaners of the street, eating scraps and waste. They were valued, though not always loved. There are accounts of towns trying to ban them, only to realize the filth grew worse without their greedy help. One curious anecdote from a 14th century record tells of a pig being put on trial for knocking over a child and causing injury. The court sentenced it to death, a grim but strangely human attempt at justice. People laughed about it for generations, half in disbelief and half because, in truth, the line between person and beast felt thinner then. You move past the butcher's stall, where blood trickles along a wooden board into a small trough. Flies gather even in cool air. The butcher, hands thick as hams, sharpens his blade on a whetstone. He nods as you pass. It is not grotesque to him. Meat is precious, and no part of the animal is wasted. The smell is sharp but real, a reminder that food comes with cost. Somewhere nearby, the church bell rings again. The sound echoes over roofs and fields, signaling mid-morning. Time flows here not in numbers but in sound. Bells for work, bells for prayer, bells for rest. You know without looking that it must be nearly tierce. The hour before midday labour begins in earnest. You glance toward the manor at the edge of the village. A rider on horseback approaches, his cloak stirring behind him. Dust curls from the road. Children pause their play to watch. The presence of a horse always means something important. News, orders, or taxes. You turn away, content to focus on the smaller stories unfolding around you. Researchers continue to debate how far daily life extended beyond survival in rural settlements. Was there leisure, laughter, a sense of beauty amid the struggle? Diaries and letters from later centuries suggest there was. Jokes, songs, flirtation at the well, all woven into the routine. Even hardship becomes bearable when shared, and this village shares everything, willingly or not. You stop by a small cart selling salted herring. The fish smells strong, but you are used to it. A woman behind the cart wraps 2 pieces in cloth and hands them to you with a smile. Her hands are rough, her nails stained from brine. You pay her with a single coin, and she drops it into a wooden bowl. Trade is as old as hunger itself, and every exchange carries a flicker of connection. Farther down, a man is sweeping his doorway with a broom of twigs. The dust rises, catching the sunlight in small golden motes. He pauses to greet you, his voice warm. You exchange small talk about the weather, about how the river is running high this season, about the rumor that the miller's daughter might be wed before spring. It is gossip, yes, but it keeps the world turning. A contemporary chronicle from London describes how street life was the true heart of community. Markets were not only for trade, but for meeting, for storytelling, for finding out who had died, who had been born, and who had vanished. News spread by word of mouth, faster than any parchment could carry. The street was a living newspaper, and every person you passed added a sentence to the day's story. As the morning deepens, you notice a rhythm to everything, the rhythm of wheels over stone, of footsteps in mud, of laughter, shouts, and hammers. It is not the sterile hum of modern cities, but something closer to music, full of pauses and imperfections. You breathe in, and for a moment, you can almost believe this world is peaceful. You walk toward the edge of the market square, where traders begin to set up stalls. The smell of apples and smoke hangs in the air. Someone begins to tune a lute nearby, soft notes rising between voices. The day is taking shape, and you are part of its fabric. The mud might cling to your boots, but so does life itself, messy, noisy, and beautifully real. The market square comes alive as you step into it, a patchwork of color and noise that fills every corner of your senses. Wooden stalls creak as they are lifted into place, baskets thump against the ground, and the air carries the rich scent of baked goods, dried herbs, and tanned leather. You can almost taste the salt and smoke in the breeze. You pause for a moment just to take it in. Here, the heart of the village beats strongest. Merchants shout greetings across the square, their voices echoing against stone walls. Farmers unload turnips and onions from carts. Women arrange eggs in straw-lined baskets, and children dart between stalls with quick, curious eyes. The sound of a bell announces the opening of trade, and suddenly the quiet order of morning becomes a tide of movement and laughter. You begin to wander between stalls. The first offers fresh eels, slippery and silver, caught from the nearby river. The fisherman's hands are cracked from the cold, his beard stiff with frost. Next to him, a baker sells bread still warm from the oven, the crust dusted with coarse salt. The air near his stall feels like comfort itself, and you linger, savoring the smell before moving on. Everywhere you look, there is motion. A tanner rubs oil into leather, a potter stacks earthenware jugs, and a spice seller measures out pinches of cinnamon from a small chest, its scent intoxicating. Such spices are rare here, and people gather just to look, to imagine the taste of faraway lands they will never see. You notice how he sprinkles the powder onto the air, almost like a magician casting a spell. Historical records tell us that markets were not just about goods, but trust. Weights and measures were strictly controlled, with officials checking scales to ensure fairness. Dishonest merchants risked fines, public humiliation, or even expulsion. Yet trade also relied on personal reputation. A word from a satisfied customer could build a career, while a single accusation could ruin one. In a world without contracts, honor itself was currency. You stop near a stall filled with bright fabric scarlet, indigo, and pale green. The merchant, a woman with quick hands and sharp eyes, catches your glance. She offers a smile that means business. The cloth feels soft beneath your fingers, woven from fine wool. She tells you it comes from Flanders, carried by ship, traded through 3 towns before reaching your market. You nod, pretending to consider it, though you both know it costs more than you can spare. Still, touching it feels like a small luxury, a brush with the distant world. A curious account from a Venetian trader mentions that some markets employed official criers who shouted out prices to prevent secret deals. The noise must have been extraordinary, a dozen voices trying to outshout one another while pigs, carts, and dogs added their own chorus. You imagine standing here, listening to the hum of human ambition wrapped in laughter and barter. A group of musicians gathers near the fountain, their instruments rough but cheerful. A flute joins a drum, then a fiddle, and soon a small crowd forms. A child begins to dance, feet slapping against the stones, skirt twirling in the sunlight. The crowd claps in rhythm, coins tossed into a wooden bowl. Even trade pauses for a moment to enjoy the tune. You find yourself smiling without realizing it. Researchers have long wondered how markets shaped identity in these centuries. Were they merely economic, or were they also emotional spaces where people came to feel alive among others? The evidence points to both. Market days were social lifelines, especially for those from isolated farms. They were where news traveled, where friendships formed, where marriages began. Even the smallest transaction carried a thread of community. You buy a small wedge of cheese wrapped in cloth, its surface dusted with ash to preserve it. The seller, an older man with kind eyes, tells you it came from goats grazing on the hill beyond the mill. His voice is soft, proud. He slips an extra piece into your hand with a wink, a gesture of quiet generosity that feels like warmth in the cold air. You tuck it away carefully, promising to return next week. As noon approaches, the square grows even busier. The sound of bargaining rises, blending with the low murmur of prayers from those passing the church. A man sells candles dipped in beeswax, their sweet scent cutting through the harsher smells of smoke and sweat. Women gather near a stall selling honey, its golden glow catching the light. Bees still hum faintly around the jars, drawn to their own work. Not far away, a group of traveling merchants argue in a language you barely recognize. They wear bright cloaks, carry coins stamped with strange symbols, and lead pack animals burdened with goods from distant lands. To you, they are a glimpse of something almost mythical, proof that the world is wider than the horizon. One of the oddest customs mentioned in guild records describes how sellers in some towns offered free samples by letting customers lick a grain or sip a drop of ale before buying. It was called tasting the trust. Today, such a thing might seem unthinkable, but then it was a gesture of honesty. If you tasted what the merchant drank, it meant the product was pure. The church bell rings again, marking midday. Slowly, the noise begins to soften. Merchants close their bags, travelers pack their wares, and the crowd thins as people head home to eat. You take one last look at the square, now scattered with straw and apple cores, the remnants of morning's bustle. A dog noses through the scraps while the musicians pack up their instruments. You walk away, feeling the hum of life still in your chest. The market has left you full not just with food but with color, laughter, and the quiet sense of belonging. Every shout, every smell, every exchange has woven itself into your senses. The road ahead feels a little less empty, and as you step back into the lanes, you carry the marketplace with you like an echo. The market noise fades behind you, replaced by the rhythmic sound of work. You follow the steady tapping, scraping, and humming that drifts through the air like the heartbeat of the village. This is the sound of skill, of lives built through hands and patience. Every clang, every chisel mark, every spark from a forge carries a story. You pause outside the blacksmith's hut. The heat hits you even before you step inside, dry and fierce against the cool morning air. Sparks burst like fireflies as the smith brings his hammer down again and again on a glowing strip of iron. The air smells of metal and sweat. His face is blackened with soot, but his eyes are sharp and steady. He nods to you once, without breaking rhythm. It is a kind of greeting shared between people who understand that work speaks louder than words. The anvil sings beneath his hammer, a steady note rising and falling. Each strike shapes not just metal but survival horseshoes, nails, hinges, plough blades. Without his skill, the village itself would falter. You watch as he plunges the iron into water. Steam erupts with a hiss, wrapping the air in fog. The smell of it is oddly comforting, a mix of heat and life. Next door, the carpenter is at work too. His workshop smells of fresh-cut wood, sharp and resinous. You step closer and see curls of shavings scattered across the floor like ribbons. He is shaping a stool leg, hands moving with the kind of certainty that only years can give. His tools are simple saws, planes, chisels, but his results are elegant. He hums quietly, a tune that rises and falls with each stroke of his blade. Documents from guild archives reveal that craftsmen often worked side by side, their sounds blending into the daily rhythm of towns and villages. The blacksmith's hammer, the carpenter's saw, the weaver's shuttle, all formed a kind of music of survival. It was not only about necessity, it was about pride, reputation, and mastery. A good craftsperson could travel anywhere and find work because skill itself was a passport. You wander on and find the baker kneading dough in front of his oven. His arms shine with flour and sweat, the dough folding and stretching beneath his palms. The smell makes your stomach tighten. It is warmth and hope in tangible form. He sprinkles a handful of poppy seeds across the surface, muttering what might be a blessing or just habit. Bread is sacred here, both food and faith. A curious note from a 13th century record describes how bakers were required to mark their loaves with unique symbols before selling them. It allowed officials to trace dishonest sellers who underweighted bread. The marks became a kind of signature, part protection, part pride. You imagine the same pattern repeated in every loaf across a lifetime, an imprint of honest labor baked into daily life. Nearby, the weaver sits by her loom. The wooden frame creaks softly as her shuttle glides through the threads. The sound is hypnotic, steady as breathing. She is spinning not just wool but stories, every pattern telling something about her family, her village, her faith. You touch the finished cloth, a small square of soft brown, and marvel at how human warmth can live inside such simplicity. Researchers often discuss how craft connected body and soul in these centuries. Working hands became extensions of belief and patience. Monastic scribes saw writing as a form of prayer, just as blacksmiths saw sparks as blessings. Every act of creation carried meaning. You sense it even now as you watch a potter at his wheel nearby, shaping wet clay into something enduring. The potter's fingers move like dancers, pressing, turning, lifting. A shape emerges rough at first, then elegant. He smooths the rim with a wet cloth and places it beside others to dry. The smell of damp clay fills your nose, earthy and raw. He looks up briefly, smiling through the dust. The wheel keeps spinning. In this motion, time feels circular, not linear. One account from Florence mentions that apprentices often slept in their workshops, surrounded by the smell of their craft. The blacksmith by the forge, the cobbler near the leather, the scribe beside his ink. To live among one's tools was to live among one's purpose. The rhythm of work was the rhythm of existence. You pause again outside a small cottage where a woman sits spinning thread. The spindle twirls between her fingers, twisting wool into long, smooth strands. She works slowly, speaking softly to a child sitting nearby. The motion never stops, a gentle, hypnotic rhythm like the turning of the seasons. Spinning, she tells you, is thinking. You can believe her. The repetition has a meditative calm, a quiet grace. It remains uncertain to scholars how much of medieval craftsmanship was guided by ritual or superstition. Some believed that whispering a blessing over iron kept it strong, or that spinning under a full moon made thread less likely to tangle. Others saw such acts as habit rather than faith. Either way, you can feel that invisible layer of meaning in every action, like dust shimmering in sunlight. As the afternoon grows, the sounds of labor blend into a steady hum. The forge, the wheel, the loom, the chisel all working in concert. You feel the pull of it, the human desire to shape, to fix, to create. Your hands itch with the instinct to join in, to build something that will last beyond this day. The smell of warm bread drifts through the air again. You smile, realizing the village is more than a collection of huts and people. It is a web of skill, each craft tied to the other. The smith sharpens the scythe that harvests the grain, the baker turns the grain into bread, and the potter makes the bowl to hold it. Nothing stands alone. You take one last look around before heading back toward the fields. The air is filled with movement and rhythm, each sound tied to the next. You think about how the modern world hums with machines, yet somehow feels quieter than this. Here, every sound means life. Every motion means care. As you walk away, the smith's hammer strikes again, ringing through the air like a heartbeat that refuses to stop. It follows you down the lane, echoing in your ears long after you leave the square. You leave the square behind and walk toward the fields. The road is little more than packed dirt lined with wildflowers and the occasional patch of mud. A soft breeze rolls through, carrying the scent of grass and damp soil. Ahead, the horizon stretches wide, dotted with figures bent over the earth. The world feels quieter here, though the air hums with life. You join the farmers, their voices low and steady as they work. The sound of hoes striking soil forms a rhythm you can almost fall asleep to. The earth beneath your feet is dark and rich, soft from spring rain. You crouch down, scoop a handful, and let it crumble through your fingers. It smells of everything living and dying, everything that makes this world turn. Season shapes everything here. In spring, the soil opens, ready for seed. In summer, the fields shimmer gold. Autumn means harvest, and winter brings both rest and worry. No one escapes the season's rule. Every person, from the humblest peasant to the wealthiest lord, depends on what the land decides to give. A clerk's record from the 14th century describes how village work was organized around the church calendar. Saints' days and holy feasts punctuated the year, giving people moments to rest and celebrate between ploughing and reaping. Time itself was a patchwork of work and worship, toil and gratitude. You can feel that balance in the fields, the sense that effort and prayer belong to the same breath. The men pull ploughs while oxen strain against their yokes, their sides slick with sweat. The creak of leather harnesses mixes with the calls of crows circling overhead. Women walk beside them, dropping seeds in even lines. A child follows, scattering ashes and manure for luck and fertility. Every gesture feels ancient, older than the village itself. A curious detail preserved in folk songs tells that farmers sometimes sang charms while sowing. The verses were short, simple, and slightly different in each region. Some were blessings for good weather, others small bargains with unseen spirits. It is unclear whether people truly believed in the magic or simply enjoyed the rhythm, but the songs endured for centuries. You straighten your back, looking across the expanse of green. The sun climbs higher, turning the dew into a shimmer. It is beautiful in a rough, honest way. The kind of beauty that asks nothing except endurance. Every furrow carved into the soil feels like an act of hope. The reeve, a local overseer, walks between the rows, checking the work. His voice carries authority but not cruelty. He knows these people, works beside them, eats the same bread. He counts tools, marks fields, and mutters about the weather. Weather, after all, is the truest master here. Researchers have long studied how medieval agriculture adapted to changing climates. During warm years, crops flourished, villages grew, and trade expanded. In colder decades, famine and hardship followed. The little ice age that began in the 14th century darkened many lives, yet even then, people endured. They learned to rotate crops, to plant barley when wheat failed, to dig drainage ditches when rains grew too heavy. Survival itself became an art. You walk toward the orchard at the edge of the field. The trees there are twisted and old, heavy with buds that promise fruit later in the year. Bees hum among the blossoms. A girl stands on a stool, tying scraps of cloth to the branches, a charm for a good harvest. Her grandmother taught her the ritual. No one remembers where it began, but no one dares to skip it either. Another small curiosity recorded by a travelling friar mentions that villagers believed a loaf of bread buried in the corner of a field could keep frost away. He laughed when he wrote it, calling it a rustic fancy, but you sense the quiet poetry behind it. To give food to the earth so the earth might feed you, it makes a certain kind of sense. The day grows warmer. Sweat gathers beneath your collar as you work beside others, pulling weeds, turning soil, adjusting the plow's direction. The rhythm becomes hypnotic. Step, bend, lift, breathe. A lark sings above, its notes rising into the endless blue. For a moment, the entire world feels suspended between labor and peace. At midday, the workers pause. Bread is broken, cheese shared, and a jug of ale passed around. Laughter rises, brief but bright. You taste the bread dense and still warm from someone's satchel, and feel the grainy texture on your tongue. It is the taste of sustenance, of companionship, of everything that binds people together. When work resumes, you notice how even fatigue carries grace. Each person moves with quiet purpose. There is no rush, only rhythm. Children chase each other along the hedgerow, their shouts ringing like music. A dog barks once, then settles into the grass. Life continues in a slow, unhurried loop. Some historians still question whether peasants saw themselves as powerless or simply as part of nature's cycle. Letters and parish records show both humility and pride. A farmer might curse the rain one day and thank the same sky the next. It was not resignation, it was acceptance, born from centuries of watching the earth teach patience. As afternoon stretches, the work draws to a close. The tools are gathered, the oxen led home. The field, newly turned, gleams in soft light. You stand for a moment, feeling the earth beneath your boots, the quiet satisfaction of a day's effort. The wind shifts, carrying the smell of distant cooking fires. You take a slow breath, wipe your hands on your tunic, and start walking back toward the village. The path feels longer now, but lighter somehow. Behind you, the field rests, full of promise, waiting for rain and time to do their part. You return to the village as the sun leans west, passing through the lanes where the rhythm of work takes on a different tone. The fields may belong to men's labor, but the homes pulse with the energy of women who never truly stop moving. The sound of washing, sweeping, and chopping echoes between the cottages, mingling with the laughter of children and the clucking of hens. You pause by the well. A group of women are gathered there, their skirts tucked high, sleeves rolled to the elbow, buckets creak as they draw up water, muscles flexing under the weight. They talk constantly, their voices overlapping in easy harmony. Gossip is their reward for effort, a chorus of shared burdens and shared amusement. Someone mentions a new baby, another a husband too fond of the alehouse, and everyone laughs softly. Domestic life here is relentless, but not joyless. Each movement carries purpose. A woman spreads linen to dry on the hedgerow, the fabric catching the light like wings. Another kneels by her doorway, sweeping dust into the street, her face calm and distant. A pot simmers on the hearth nearby, its steam carrying the scent of onion and herbs. You breathe in deeply, feeling the warmth against your face. Housework in this age is constant. Meals must be cooked, water fetched, clothes washed, floors swept, children tended, and animals fed. There are no stoves, no soap bars, no running water. Every task takes twice the time and 10 times the energy. Yet the women move through it with practiced ease, as though each day's rhythm were a song they have always known. Manorial records from England show that women worked both inside and outside the home. They milked cows, tended gardens, spun wool, brewed ale, and often helped in the fields during sowing and harvest. The idea of women's work being confined to domestic space is far more modern than most realize. Here, labor knows few boundaries. Survival erases all distinctions. Inside a nearby cottage, you see a young mother rocking her baby while stirring a pot with her free hand. The child coos softly, half asleep. The fire crackles, shadows flickering across the walls. You watch for a moment, caught by the simple beauty of it, the balance of care and endurance. A curious little record from a 13th century abbey mentions that midwives were often both respected and feared. They carried knowledge older than books, herbs to ease pain, prayers to protect against spirits, and hands skilled in saving lives. Some were later accused of witchcraft, though many were simply healers whose wisdom frightened those in power. It is a reminder that strength has always lived quietly among ordinary women. You walk on and pass a row of spinning wheels. The rhythmic whir fills the air, a sound both soothing and eternal. Young girls twist wool into thread, their fingers moving faster than thought. They chatter softly about courtships, marriages, and stories of saints. Every turn of the spindle adds to the fabric of the village itself. Researchers studying medieval households have noted how women often served as the memory keepers of their communities. They taught songs, recipes, prayers, and traditions passed down through generations. When families moved or famine struck, it was women who carried those memories like invisible heirlooms. Even now, you can feel the weight of their presence in the air, grounding the chaos around them. By late afternoon, the washing lines flap gently in the breeze, heavy with clean linen. The scent of soapwort and sun-warmed cloth fills the yard. A small girl helps her mother fold sheets, humming tunelessly. Her hair shines gold in the light, her hands already mimicking the movements she will one day repeat without thinking. Not all domestic labor stays quiet. Brewing ale, for example, is both skill and livelihood. Many women, known as alewives, brewed small batches for local sale. Their homes often smelled faintly of malt and yeast. Some became successful enough to draw the envy of neighbors. An old town bylaw once joked that the surest sign of a good alewife was the number of men loitering at her door by noon. You pass one such cottage now. Inside, the scent of fermentation is rich and sweet. A woman stands beside a row of clay jugs, tasting her latest brew with practiced judgment. She catches your eye, grins, and offers a nod of satisfaction. Her apron is stained, her arms strong. You realize she is as much a craftsman as any blacksmith or potter. In one of those details scholars love to debate. Some say the frothy ale of medieval women inspired the later iconography of witches' pointed hats, cauldrons, even cats chasing mice around the brewing room. Whether coincidence or cultural echo, the image lingers. You smile at the thought, picturing these women as quiet rebels stirring magic in their kitchens. Evening approaches, and the cottages begin to glow from within. Smoke curls from chimneys, the smell of food rising in thick ribbons. You hear laughter, the clink of wooden spoons, the soft thud of kneading dough. For a moment, the entire village feels like a single organism, each home a heartbeat in sync with the others. You think of how much has been built by invisible hands. The meals, the garments, the warmth, the songs, all shaped by the labor of women whose names history often forgot. Yet their fingerprints are everywhere, pressed into the very grain of the wood, the weave of the cloth, the rhythm of the day. The last light fades. You pass the well again, now still and dark. The women have gone inside, their laughter replaced by the faint crackle of fires. Somewhere a lullaby drifts through the dusk, gentle as the wind. You pause, listening before turning toward home. The song fades, but its echo stays with you, the sound of strength disguised as tenderness, of endurance wrapped in calm. You realize that in this world, the quietest work may also be the most powerful. You hear laughter before you see the children. Their voices rise above the rustle of fields and the soft murmur of daily chores. Following the sound, you find them near the edge of the village, barefoot and wild-haired, chasing one another through the grass. The sun catches their movement like sparks, and for a moment, everything feels lighter. Childhood in the Middle Ages is brief but vivid. Most children begin work before they are 10, yet these early years, however short, are full of discovery and play. The smallest carry sticks as swords, pretending to be knights. Others weave flowers into crowns or use pebbles as coins in make-believe markets. Their laughter fills the air, cutting through the fatigue that hangs over adults. You watch a boy carving a toy from a scrap of wood. His tongue peeks from the corner of his mouth as he works, concentrating fiercely. The knife is dull, but his imagination is sharp. He finishes and holds up a small horse, its shape rough but recognizable. His friend claps, and the two race off together, the toy forgotten in the dust. Childhood leaves little room for permanence. In many ways, medieval parents are practical rather than sentimental. Infancy is fragile. Disease and accident claim many before their 5th year, so affection often carries a quiet restraint. Still, love exists in gestures, a mother tucking a blanket around her child, a father sharing the last piece of bread. The softness hides inside small things. Manuscript accounts from monastic schools record that some children began formal education as early as 7, mostly boys from wealthier families. They learned Latin prayers, arithmetic, and music under strict discipline. The sound of a cane striking a desk was as common as chanting. Yet learning carried prestige, a path that might lift a family's name beyond its station. Not every child had that chance. Most learned by watching, imitating, and helping. A girl learns to spin by sitting beside her mother, fingers tracing the twist of wool. A boy learns carpentry from his father, holding tools half his own size. Apprenticeship, in its earliest form, begins at home. You can feel how deeply knowledge flows through touch, repetition, and shared silence. A fascinating account from a 12th century French town mentions that boys apprenticed to craftsmen often lived in their master's household. The master became both teacher and guardian, responsible for moral as well as practical education. The apprentices swept floors, carried water, and watched, year after year, until skill became instinct. Some stayed for life, others moved on, carrying their trade to another town, another chance. Nearby, a group of girls play a game with pebbles. They toss them into the air, catching them on the back of their hands. Their laughter rings pure and bright. The game is older than memory, found in every culture, carried from one century to the next. Watching them, you realize how play survives even in hardship. The human need for joy is as stubborn as hunger. Researchers studying medieval childhood note that toys, when found in archaeological digs, are surprisingly delicate tiny wooden dolls, carved animals, clay whistles, and rag balls. Some are crudely made, others finely painted, suggesting that affection transcended class. A toy was never just an object. It was a wish for happiness, a small act of love. As the afternoon deepens, the children drift toward the pond. They skip stones across the surface, count the ripples, then collapse in laughter when one stone plops instead of gliding. Their clothes are muddy, their hair tangled, but their joy is effortless. The simplicity of their play feels like a secret too easily forgotten in modern life. You notice an older child, perhaps 12, watching over the younger ones. His hands rest on his hips, already mimicking the posture of an adult. Soon he will join his father in the fields, or begin training at the forge. Childhood is not a separate world here. It is a narrow bridge between birth and responsibility. Still, for now, he watches the others and smiles. A curious local legend tells that fairies sometimes swapped newborns with their own. Parents would hang iron scissors above a cradle to ward off such mischief. Whether anyone truly believed it is uncertain, but the tale shows how deeply people feared losing what they loved. In a world so fragile, imagination became a form of protection. Evening begins to creep in. Mothers call their children home with sharp voices softened by affection. The smaller ones are scooped up, the older ones grumble, but obey. You walk with them toward the village, the smell of supper drifting through the air. Somewhere behind you, the pond still ripples from the last stone thrown. A late entry in a parish chronicle describes how, during harvest feasts, children were given small pieces of bread dipped in honey to symbolize sweetness for the coming year. The gesture, simple as it was, carried immense meaning. You think of it now as families gather indoors, laughter dimming into the hum of evening routine. Inside one cottage, a mother braids her daughter's hair by firelight. The girl fights sleep, her eyes fluttering. Her brother sits nearby, carving another toy horse. The fire crackles, casting gold over their faces. You stand at the doorway a moment longer, feeling the warmth spill out into the dark. Perhaps, you think, Childhood has always been this, a flicker of laughter against the long stretch of life, a bright moment before the weight of the world settles. You close your eyes and listen. The wind moves softly through the village, carrying the scent of bread and grass, the faint echo of games already forgotten. You step back into the glow of firelight, drawn by the sound of clinking cups and the low murmur of voices around a long wooden table. Supper is ready. The air smells of roasted barley, boiled vegetables and smoke. You feel hunger tug gently at your stomach. Eating, in this world, is both necessity and ritual, a daily moment when labor pauses and community gathers. The table is nothing fancy, just rough-hewn planks supported by trestles. Wooden bowls and spoons line its length, each one slightly different in shape and wear. At the center sits a loaf of coarse bread, its crust split and steaming. Beside it, a pot of stew bubbles softly. The ingredients are humble: peas, onions, maybe a bit of salted pork if luck has been kind this week. Still, the aroma fills the room like a promise. Everyone sits close, shoulders touching. Conversation hums between bites. A baby fusses in the corner, while an old man tells a half-remembered story from his youth. You can almost see the candlelight flicker in his eyes as he speaks. Here, time feels slower, suspended between spoonfuls and silence. For peasants, food comes from the same soil they till. Pottage remains the daily meal, thickened by whatever grows in season. Bread serves as utensil and plate. Trenchers, flat slabs of stale bread, soak up stew and later feed the dogs or pigs. Nothing is wasted. Even scraps have purpose. Hunger has taught everyone to treat food with reverence. A document from a manor household roll lists the daily allowance for labourers: a loaf of bread, a quart of ale, and sometimes a bit of cheese. It might sound meagre, yet compared to famine years, it is abundance. The rhythm of eating defines security. To have bread each day means life is holding steady. You glance toward the far end of the table, where the Reeves family sits. Their bowls hold slightly richer fare, perhaps a piece of dried fish or a spoonful of butter. Even in a small village, hierarchy lives in the meal. Where you sit, what you eat, and when you begin, are all quiet declarations of your place in the world. Among the wealthy, dining becomes ceremony. In great halls, meals unfold in elaborate courses. Servants carry platters of meat, pies filled with spiced fruit, roasted birds dressed in feathers for display. Goblets shine with wine, and musicians play softly while guests murmur beneath tapestries. A feast is not just nourishment, it is theatre, a public performance of power and refinement. Records from noble households describe rules of table conduct that feel almost poetic. Guests must not lick their fingers, nor speak with a full mouth. They must not lean over dishes, nor pick teeth with knives. Bread is broken, not cut, for cutting suggests aggression. Cleanliness, or at least the illusion of it, marks civility. The idea of etiquette begins here, born from hunger and hierarchy. A curious note from a medieval cookbook advises boiling meat in ale to strengthen the heart and comfort the stomach. It suggests adding saffron if available, though few could afford it. Recipes, like prayers, were acts of hope. To flavor food was to push back against monotony, to remind oneself that joy could be tasted. You dip your bread into the stew and chew slowly. The flavor is earthy, comforting. Across the table, a boy whispers something that makes his sister laugh. Their mother gives them a look, but her lips twitch with amusement. For a moment, the family feels timeless, as if nothing beyond this table exists. Researchers examining medieval eating habits point out that meals were social anchors. Even in poverty, people ate together, facing one another. Solitary dining was rare, and often viewed with suspicion. Sharing food meant sharing survival. It also reinforced memory. Stories were passed down between bites, turning supper into a kind of oral history. When the bowls are empty, a woman pours a final round of ale. The liquid glows amber in the candlelight, Someone begins a song, soft, rhythmic, half prayer and half lullaby. The words drift around the table, carrying comfort. For those who cannot read, songs like these are both entertainment and education. They teach gratitude, warn of greed, celebrate harvests, and soothe hungry hearts. A curious superstition recorded in rural France claims that leaving bread upside down invites misfortune. Bread, being sacred as both food and symbol, must always rest with its crust facing heaven. You glance at the loaf before you, perfectly upright, and smile. Even superstition, in its way, speaks of respect for life's essentials. As the candles burn low, the conversation softens. The old man at the end of the table clears his throat and tells one last story. It is about a saint who shared his meal with a stranger and found his food multiplied the next morning. Whether true or not, the story fills the room with a hush. Everyone stares at their bowls, reminded that gratitude makes even a small meal sacred. Outside, the wind sighs against the shutters. The fire crackles softly, smoke curling up toward the beams. People begin to rise from the table, their bellies full, their hearts quiet. Dishes are stacked, crumbs brushed into the fire, and the room grows dim. You stay a little longer, feeling the warmth fading into the air. The smell of stew still lingers, thick and homey. This moment of peace feels eternal, as if supper might never end. In truth, it is already memory, but the comfort remains. The taste, the voices, the flickering light, they settle into you like the last warmth of a hearth before sleep. The next sound you notice is not human at all. It is the slow, deliberate toll of a bell rolling over the rooftops. It calls not for labor or for food, but for stillness. You lift your head toward the church tower rising above the village, its stone edges soft in the evening haze. The sound deepens as if the air itself were praying. Faith fills every corner of this world. You cannot walk far without hearing it, seeing it, or feeling its weight. The church stands at the center of the village, both physically and spiritually. Its walls are thick and cool, smelling faintly of wax and stone dust. Even from outside, you sense the calm that lives within. You step inside. Candles flicker along the altar, their light soft and steady. The scent of incense floats like mist, sharp with resin and smoke. A monk's voice echoes from the far end, chanting in Latin. You do not understand every word, but the rhythm touches you all the same. It feels ancient, as if the earth itself were humming in reply. Everyday life here moves by the church bell. It marks dawn prayers, midday labor, afternoon rest, and curfew. The ringing folds time into devotion. To live in the Middle Ages is to measure every hour through faith. Even those who never enter the church still live by its sound. Parish records from England describe how the bell was rung for storms, for births, for deaths, and even to ward off disease. Villagers believed that sound carried divine protection. The tolling reminded them that they were never alone, even when fields failed or loved ones vanished. The church's voice was the heartbeat of the community. You take a seat on a rough wooden bench. The stone beneath your feet feels cold. A woman kneels nearby, whispering her prayers. Her lips move in rhythm with the flicker of the candles. Her hands, calloused from work, look delicate in the dim light. You can sense how prayer, for her, is less about words and more about breath. A chronicle from the 12th century describes how even the simplest prayers were acts of connection. To pray was to speak to the rhythm of the universe, to remind oneself that suffering and joy shared the same thread. The same hands that sowed seeds or washed clothes could also touch eternity through a whispered Amen. A small boy enters, clutching a wax taper. He lights it carefully from another flame and sets it near the statue of Mary. The wax drips slowly down the side, pooling at her feet. His mother stands behind him, silent, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. The gesture says everything that language cannot. Outside of church walls, faith breathes in quieter forms. People cross themselves before a meal, hang sprigs of herbs in doorways, or whisper blessings to animals before slaughter. Saints are everywhere in conversation. St. Dunstan guards the smiths, St. Anne the mothers, St. Roch the sick. Each task, each fear, has its holy companion. A curious entry in a monk's diary tells that villagers once lit fires on hilltops to honour St. John's Eve, believing the smoke carried prayers into heaven. Some historians think the custom was older still, borrowed from pagan rituals. Whether Christian or ancient, the flame represented hope. Faith was rarely about precision, it was about endurance. Researchers studying medieval spirituality often debate how deeply belief shaped emotion. Was faith a comfort or a burden? The answer seems to be both. It soothed the unexplainable, while also binding people to rules that could be harsh. Yet even doubt had its place here, whispered softly in confession or tucked into the margins of prayers. You leave the church and stand beneath the twilight sky. The bell has stopped, but the sound lingers in your bones. The village around you glows faintly from candlelight through small windows. Somewhere, a psalm drifts from a doorway, the melody thin but sure. It mingles with the bleating of goats and the laughter of children not yet called to bed. Faith does not always demand grand gestures. It lives in repetition, the crossing of oneself before a journey, the lighting of candles at dusk, the murmured blessings that slip from lips without thought. In this world, belief is less about miracles and more about rhythm. A curious custom from the German countryside describes how farmers blessed their tools before harvest, sprinkling them with holy water to guard against blight. Whether it worked or not was beside the point. The ritual turned work into prayer. Every swing of the scythe became an act of reverence. Night deepens, the air cools, and the first stars appear. You walk past the churchyard, where graves rest under uneven stones. Someone has left flowers on one, freshly picked from the meadow. The petals tremble in the wind. You feel both sorrow and peace. Death, here, is not feared but folded gently into life's pattern. You pause at the gate and look back at the tower, its outline dark against the fading sky. The candlelight within glows faintly through a narrow window. For a moment, it looks like a star caught on earth. You stand still, listening to the hush that follows prayer. In this silence, you understand something simple. Faith is not always belief. Sometimes it is merely the act of staying still long enough to listen. And as the wind stirs around you, carrying the faint smell of smoke and blossoms, you let that stillness settle deep inside you, quiet as a heartbeat. The scent of herbs drifts through the narrow lane as you walk, sharp and strangely soothing. It leads you to a small cottage at the edge of the village, where bundles of dried leaves hang from the beams and clay jars line the shelves. Inside, the air is thick with warmth and the faint sting of vinegar. A woman bends over a wooden table, grinding something green into a paste. She looks up briefly, smiles, and returns to her work. Here, healing is as much art as it is mystery. Sickness visits often in the Middle Ages. Coughs linger through winter, fevers rise without warning, and small wounds can turn deadly. Yet life continues, anchored by care and improvisation. The village healer mixes plants, prayers, and instinct in equal measure. She knows which leaves ease pain and which must never be touched. Her knowledge comes from experience, passed hand to hand, mother to daughter, whispered like a secret rather than taught like a science. You watch her crush garlic and mint, adding it to a small pot of honey. She calls it the poor man's salve, good for cuts and infections. The smell fills the air, sweet and sharp. She ties the mixture in cloth, leaving it to steep by the fire. Around you, jars labelled in faded ink hold rosemary, sage, chamomile, and something that looks suspiciously like frog skin. Healing here is not sterile. It is intimate, woven into the rhythms of soil and season. In monastic infirmaries, care takes another shape. Monks tend the sick in long stone halls where candles burn day and night. The sound of prayer mingles with the rustle of herbs soaked in wine. Manuscripts from such places show drawings of plants alongside Latin recipes for balms and teas. The monks were careful observers, cataloguing what helped and what harmed, long before the word doctor carried its modern meaning. One written record from a monastery in Salerno describes a remedy for fever: ground willow bark mixed with vinegar, wrapped in linen, and placed on the forehead. Centuries later, scientists would discover that willow holds the same compound used in aspirin. It reminds you how much wisdom sleeps quietly inside tradition, waiting to be understood. You hear the door creak as an old man enters the healer's cottage. He limps, leaning heavily on a stick. His hand is wrapped in cloth, stained dark. The woman unwraps it gently, her fingers steady. The wound is ugly, swollen and red, but she does not flinch. She cleans it with warm wine, then presses a poultice of herbs against it. The man winces but says nothing. She hums softly as she works, her voice low and calm, more like a lullaby than a chant. A curious account from a 14th century journal mentions that healers often whispered specific words while treating wounds, believing that sound itself had power. Whether divine or simply comforting, no one could say. What matters is that it helped. Healing in this world lives as much in the ear as in the body. Beyond herbal remedies, there are charms and tokens too. A child might wear a small bone around the neck to keep away fever. A traveller might carry a sprig of yarrow in his shoe against plague. A pregnant woman might keep a carved cross beneath her pillow for safety. Faith and medicine walk hand in hand here, their steps indistinguishable. Researchers continue to puzzle over how much of this medicine was effective and how much was belief. The line is blurry. Some treatments worked by chance, others by chemistry yet unknown, and still others by the power of comfort. The healer's hands, warm and sure, may have done more good than any potion she brewed. You think of how medicine, even now, relies on trust. The sick must believe in the one who cares for them. That bond, ancient and fragile, still shapes every act of healing. In the flickering light of the cottage, that truth feels older than language itself. You step outside and breathe the cool evening air. The smell of herbs clings to you, pleasant and strange. Down the path, another kind of healer waits the village barber-surgeon. His shop is marked by a pole painted with spiraling red and white, a symbol that will one day cross centuries. Inside, he sharpens his blade on a whetstone, preparing for his next task. Surgery, in this age, is rough and fast. Bloodletting remains the most common cure for imbalance, based on the belief that sickness comes from excess in the body's humours. Physicians speak of four: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Too much of one leads to fever, melancholy, or worse. The barber's job is to restore harmony through cuts, leeches, and cups of hot glass. It sounds cruel, yet it is done with conviction. In a curious old text known as Regimen Sanitatis Salernitanum, advice for health reads like poetry: rise early, eat lightly, drink wine in moderation, and laugh often. It might be the simplest and most lasting prescription ever written. You smile at the thought that even in the age of leeches, laughter was medicine. The healer's cottage glows behind you as night settles. Inside, she still moves among her jars and bundles, tending her patients with quiet purpose. Somewhere nearby, a bell tolls from the church, marking the passing of another hour. The sound blends with the faint rustle of leaves and the occasional bark of a dog. You pause and touch your sleeve. It smells faintly of thyme and vinegar, the scent of care. It lingers like comfort or memory. In a world of uncertainty, perhaps that is enough: the belief that someone, somewhere, knows what might ease your pain. As you walk back through the village, the air feels softer. The stars glimmer above you, cool and clear. The healer's window remains lit, a single square of gold against the darkness. You take one last look and whisper a silent wish, not for miracles but simply for peace. The next morning begins with music, not from instruments, but from the chatter of voices and the clatter of preparations. The air carries a faint sweetness, the smell of bread, ale, and something else, flowers perhaps woven into garlands. You follow the sound until you reach the green outside the church, where people are gathered in laughter and bright color. Today is a day for love, and the village hums with it. Marriage here is both ceremony and contract. It binds families, land, and lineage as much as hearts. The bride stands near the church door, her gown simple but freshly washed, her hair covered with a wreath of rosemary and ribbons. The groom looks both proud and nervous, his best tunic smelling faintly of beeswax and smoke. Children dart between the guests, scattering petals and giggling. The air feels alive. The priest raises his hands, speaking the words that join them in holy union. His Latin rolls like river water, steady and ancient. The couple clasps hands, their fingers trembling. It is a gesture older than writing, more binding than any parchment. When he blesses them, a cheer rises from the crowd, loud and joyful. Someone begins to play a small pipe, and the first dance begins. Records from medieval England show that weddings often took place outside the church doors rather than inside. The open air symbolized honesty before God and community. After the blessing, the pair would step into the church for a brief mass, then out again into sunlight and celebration. Faith, law, and life merged into one simple rhythm. Marriage is rarely about romance alone. Families arrange matches based on alliances, property, or survival. Yet affection grows in strange places. A girl may marry the boy she met at the harvest, or a widow may find comfort in the miller who brings her flour each week. Love, even in a world of duty, finds its way through small kindnesses. A curious passage from a court record describes how a couple declared their union privately, saying the words, "I take thee," before witnesses but without a priest. The church frowned upon it, yet the law often accepted it as binding. For some, love was less about ritual than promise. They called it marriage of the heart, and though risky, it spoke of courage and faith in one another. After the vows, the feast begins. Long tables stretch across the green, covered with dishes of bread, cheese, roasted meat, and sweetmeats made from honey and almonds. Jugs of ale pass from hand to hand, and laughter rolls like thunder. A fiddler tunes his instrument, joined by a drum and a small harp. The melody leaps and spins, pulling everyone into its orbit. Even the priest smiles. In a corner, young girls whisper and giggle, watching the bride. Their talk is full of dreams and superstition. One plucks petals from a daisy, chanting softly to see whether her own love will come soon. Another hides a small charm under her sleeve, a coin blessed by the smith for good fortune. Love, here, is both hope and game, woven from stories as much as life. Researchers studying medieval marriage customs point out that while law and religion shaped the framework, emotion still thrived within it. Letters between husbands and wives who lived apart show tenderness, humor, and longing. One husband wrote from war, promising his wife that he still carried her ribbon tied around his wrist for luck. It is easy to imagine her waiting by the hearth, fingers tracing the same knot in her own sleeve. As the afternoon passes, the music grows louder. A circle forms, and dancers link hands. Their feet stomp the ground in rhythm, dust rising in the sunlight. Ale splashes, skirts twirl, and for a few shining moments, all hardship is forgotten. The newlyweds are pulled into the center, laughing, dizzy, radiant. Someone tosses a handful of grain over them for fertility. The grains catch the light like tiny stars. A curious detail from a traveling chronicler tells that in some villages, guests would escort the couple to their home carrying torches, singing ribald songs to chase away evil spirits. It sounds bawdy, but the intention was protective. Light, laughter, and noise were weapons against the unseen. Even love needed its armor. As evening falls, the music slows. The guests drift toward their homes, still humming the day's melody. The bride and groom stand together by the doorway, their faces glowing in the last of the Sunday. The air smells of smoke, sweat, and roses. For a moment, everything feels soft, suspended in the calm between laughter and sleep. Researchers still discuss how freely people married for affection in these centuries. The evidence suggests that while duty weighed heavy, hearts were rarely silent. Songs from the time tell of secret trysts, loyal promises, and even heartbreak. Love was no invention of poets. It lived quietly in cottages, fields, and churchyards, in the small gestures of daily life. You walk away as the stars appear, the sound of distant singing following you down the lane. Somewhere behind you, the couple begins their new life together, watched over by faith, superstition, and the endless rhythm of the seasons. You smile, knowing that love, fragile and fierce, has always found its way even in the hardest of worlds. The night air cools, carrying the faint scent of rosemary from the bride's wreath. You close your eyes for a moment and listen to the echoes of laughter. It lingers, warm as firelight, fading gently into the quiet of the medieval evening. You wake to the sound of bleating goats outside the cottage, their cries echoing through the mist. Morning in the medieval countryside is never silent. The hum of life begins with animals, the steady rhythm of hooves, the cluck of hens, the low rumble of cows. You step into the chill air, and the scent of hay and manure greets you like an old friend. This world moves by the pace of its creatures, and without them, it would stop. You walk toward the byre where cows wait to be milked. Their breath clouds in the cold air, warm and sweet. A woman sits on a low stool, her hands moving with practiced ease. Milk streams into a wooden pail, splashing softly. She hums a tune that matches the rhythm of her work. You crouch nearby, feeling the calm pulse of the animals around you. Their eyes are large, patient, unhurried. The cat whines between her feet, tail high, hoping for a drop of milk. Cats are treasured here, though they earn their keep by hunting mice that sneak into grain stores. They are both companions and workers, blending affection with necessity. Dogs, too, serve many roles: herders, guards, hunters, and friends. A good dog can mean the difference between safety and loss. Written accounts from medieval estates show how animals shaped daily life in ways deeper than survival. Every creature carried meaning. The ox symbolized endurance, the sheep humility, the rooster vigilance. Even their behavior was watched for signs and omens. If a cow refused to enter the barn, some said bad weather was coming. If a dog howled at night, it was taken as a warning of death nearby. You wander to the edge of the village, where pigs root in the mud, snorting and squealing with delight. Their noise is chaotic but full of energy. In towns, pigs often roam freely, acting as living garbage collectors. In the countryside, they are raised carefully, fattened for winter. The smell is strong, yet somehow comforting. Every sound, every movement, speaks of life in motion. A curious record from Paris in the early 1300s tells of a law that fined owners whose pigs damaged property or tripped passers-by. Yet people rarely kept them penned for long. They were too valuable as scavengers. It was said that the cleanest street was the one shared with the most pigs. Whether truth or humour, the thought makes you smile. Further up the lane, geese strut with proud arrogance. Their eyes follow you, bright and suspicious. They are useful as guards, their cries loud enough to wake the whole village. Children chase them for sport, though more often it ends the other way around. The air rings with laughter and wings. A single feather floats past you, soft as breath. Beyond the cottages lies the Lord's stable. Horses stamp and snort inside, their bodies sleek and strong. The smell of hay, leather, and sweat fills the air. A young groom brushes a mare, speaking to her in quiet tones. His hands move with affection and care. For the wealthy, horses are status symbols, vital for transport and war. For the poor, they are distant marvels, glimpsed only at festivals or markets. A strange belief recorded in an old herbal claims that rubbing a horse's sweat on one's hands brings strength and luck. Whether superstition or metaphor, it reveals how deeply animals were seen as partners in human fortune. People read their movements like scripture, seeking wisdom in every glance or sound. You sit on a fence post and watch the herds move across the fields. The shepherd walks slowly behind, his cloak flapping in the wind. His dog circles the sheep with fluid grace, barking softly to guide them. The shepherd carries a flute, and when he pauses to play, the notes drift like smoke over the grass. It is a lonely music, full of space and sky. Researchers who study rural life often note how closely humans and animals lived together. Cottages were small, and in winter, livestock might sleep inside for warmth. Children grew up beside calves and lambs, learning to read moods and rhythms before they learned to read words. The bond was practical but emotional too. You can see it in the way a farmer scratches his ox's neck or a child whispers to a hen as if it understands. Not all animals were beloved. Rats and fleas spread disease, ravaging entire towns. People feared them, but also accepted them as unavoidable. Hawks were admired for hunting skill, but wolves terrified entire regions. In stories told by the fire, wolves became symbols of greed, temptation, or the devil himself. When one was killed, villagers celebrated with relief, as though evil had been banished for a time. A curious superstition from the countryside tells that a cat crossing your path at dawn could bring either luck or disaster depending on its color. Black cats were sometimes cherished as good omens for fishermen, who believed they protected against storms. Others feared them entirely. Belief shifted from place to place like the wind, never quite consistent but always alive. As evening falls, you follow the shepherd back toward the village. The animals move in slow procession, hooves and paws blending into a steady rhythm. Smoke curls from the chimneys, the promise of supper waiting. A dog barks once, then settles. The world feels whole, its sounds balanced and true. You glance toward the barn one last time. Inside, the cows shuffle in their stalls. The hens cluck softly, and the cat curls near the hearth, half asleep. The air hums with quiet life. You realize how deeply these creatures shape the peace of the night. In their warmth and movement, the village breathes. The stars begin to prick the sky, and you walk home through the fading light. The smell of hay clings to your clothes. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster calls out, confused by the dusk. You smile, thinking that even the animals, in their own way, keep time. The night settles softly around you, alive with the faint, steady rhythm of hearts, both human and not. The evening deepens, and the hum of the village turns to a softer sound, the faint strum of strings, the crackle of fire, the low murmur of stories being told. You follow the music to the largest cottage near the square. Inside, the room glows with warmth. Smoke twists lazily up through a hole in the thatch while shadows dance across the walls. People sit close together on benches and stools, their faces golden in the firelight. Tonight is not for work or prayer, but for stories. A minstrel has come to the village, a traveller with a harp slung over his back and a smile that knows how to charm a crowd. His clothes are faded from the road, but his eyes shine with mischief. He plucks a string and lets the note hang in the air until the chatter fades. Then he begins. The song is about a knight who rides into the forest seeking a golden hawk, and instead finds a spirit who tests his heart. His voice rises and falls, soft as wind one moment, fierce as thunder the next. The crowd listens in silence, the children wide-eyed. The story is familiar, told countless times, yet tonight it feels alive again, shaped by the voice that carries it. When the song ends, people cheer and clap. The minstrel bows low, then begins another tune, lighter this time. A few villagers join in, tapping spoons against their cups, laughing as the rhythm grows. The sound of their joy fills the space like sunlight. For a moment, you forget the cold outside, the fields, the weight of labor. Here, in the flicker of the hearth, life feels generous. Records from courts and taverns show how music touched every layer of medieval life. In noble halls, lutes and harps accompanied feasts. In villages, simple pipes, drums and fiddles carried the same power. Music told history, honored the saints, mocked the proud, and comforted the tired. It was memory sung aloud. A fascinating entry in a scribe's journal from the 13th century mentions that songs could travel farther than their singers. A melody born in one country might find new words in another, reshaped by accent and imagination. In this way, stories became travelers too, crossing mountains and centuries. The same tune that drifts through this cottage tonight might one day echo in a king's court. A girl by the fire begins to hum. Her voice is small but clear, the kind that silences a room without asking to. The melody is a cradle song about the moon watching over sleeping fields. Her mother taught it to her, and her grandmother before that. The room softens. A child rests his head on his mother's lap, eyes drooping. The fire sighs. The song becomes a spell of peace. Scholars who study the culture of this age often point out that music and storytelling were not entertainment in the modern sense. They were how people made sense of their world. Without books, history lived in rhyme. Without clocks, rhythm marked time. Even the simplest rhyme shared by children carried echoes of older prayers. A curious little fragment from an old manuscript lists the tools of a travelling minstrel: harp, cloak, knife, and cup. The knife was not for violence but for cutting bread or carving tokens of thanks. The cup was for ale or, more often, the coins given by those who listened. The life was hard, yet envied. Minstrels moved freely, carrying both news and dreams. Someone by the fire begins a tale next. His voice is rougher, his words local. He speaks of a miller who outwitted a tax collector by hiding coins inside loaves of bread. The listeners laugh at every twist, already guessing the ending but enjoying the journey anyway. The storyteller slaps his knee, pleased with the laughter, and takes a sip of ale before starting another. You realize that everyone here, in their way, is part of the story. The weaver nods at the right moments, the baker grins, the smith throws in a teasing remark. Each voice weaves into the fabric of the night. The storyteller's pauses are as deliberate as his words, letting the crackle of the fire fill the space between sentences. A small boy asks for a ghost story, and the minstrel obliges with one about a phantom knight who guards a buried treasure near the marsh. The tale grows darker, his voice dropping to a whisper. The room leans closer. When he suddenly claps his hands, half the children jump. Laughter follows, nervous but bright. Even fear here becomes shared joy. Researchers continue to wonder how much of what people believed came from these evenings. Folklore shaped understanding as much as faith or law. Through songs and tales, lessons traveled more easily than sermons. The line between history and imagination was soft, and perhaps that made it kinder. As the night deepens, the fire burns low. The minstrel sings one last song, gentle and slow, a tune about stars guiding lost travelers home. The melody floats upward into the smoky rafters. Some mouths move silently along with him. Others simply close their eyes and listen. When the final note fades, silence fills the room again, warm and heavy. Outside, the air smells of damp earth and distant smoke. You step into the night and hear, faintly, someone still humming the tune. It trails through the darkness like a thread of gold. You realize that music here is not meant to end. It lingers in memory, passed from voice to voice, generation to generation, as eternal as the turning of the seasons. The wind moves softly through the grass. A dog barks once, then all is still. You look back at the cottage, its firelight pulsing faintly behind the window. The world feels peaceful, wrapped in its own rhythm of sound and silence. You take a breath, the last note still echoing in your chest, and begin walking home under the stars. The morning begins quietly, though the peace feels fragile. You walk toward the center of the village, where voices rise in sharp bursts. A small crowd has gathered by the church steps, and in the midst of it stands the reeve, his staff in hand, speaking with measured calm. Today is not about harvest or prayer. Today is about order, about the invisible thread that keeps a community from unraveling. Law in the Middle Ages is as much spectacle as structure. There are few prisons and even fewer written rules for the common folk. Justice arrives in the form of public gatherings, oaths, and sometimes punishment meant to teach through example. You feel the weight of eyes watching, curious and anxious at once. The reeve calls out the first case, a dispute over grazing rights. Two men argue, their hands waving, their faces red. One insists his sheep wandered by accident, the other claims theft. The crowd listens, murmuring. Witnesses are called, each stepping forward with careful words. The reeve nods, then consults the village elders. Their decision comes swiftly. The shepherd must return 2 sheep and pay a fine in grain. The matter ends with a handshake, though neither man smiles. A written record from a rural court, known as a 100 court, describes such scenes as both practical and symbolic. Everyone watches to learn what is right and what is risky. Law here is not distant or abstract. It is part of the soil itself, shaped by need, tempered by familiarity. You break a rule, and it is your neighbor who reminds you of it. Next comes a more serious case. A woman stands accused of stealing bread from the manor storehouse. Her eyes are downcast, her hands trembling. The Lord's steward speaks sternly, yet even he seems uncomfortable. Hunger can blur the lines between sin and survival. The villagers shift uneasily, knowing that any one of them might have done the same in hard times. A curious practice known as compurgation sometimes settles such matters. The accused may swear an oath of innocence and gather neighbors to swear on her honesty. If enough vouch for her, the case is dismissed. Truth in this world is measured through reputation. Today, 5 women step forward, each laying a hand on her shoulder. Their voices join as one, solemn and certain. The reeve listens, then nods. The woman is free. Relief ripples through the crowd like wind over grass. Researchers studying rural justice note how rarely these small courts turned violent. Punishments were public, but often symbolic. A fine, a day of shame, a brief confinement. Harsh penalties were reserved for theft, arson, or treason. For ordinary disputes, reconciliation mattered more than vengeance. The goal was balance, not fear. Yet fear has its place. You hear a whisper in the crowd about the stocks at the edge of the green, the wooden frame where offenders sit with their hands and head locked. Children throw bits of straw or laugh from a distance, but the shame burns deeper than pain. The purpose is clear, to remind everyone that peace requires vigilance. A curious entry from a city record tells that some towns held mock trials for animals that caused harm, a pig trampling a garden or a cow breaking a fence. Though absurd to modern ears, these rituals reflected a belief in cosmic order. If all creatures were part of God's creation, then all must answer for wrongdoing. Justice, in its strange medieval way, belonged to everyone. The reeve raises his staff again, signaling the end of the day's judgments. The villagers begin to disperse, voices softening into ordinary chatter. You linger a moment longer, feeling the echo of authority in the air. Law, you realize, is not carved into stone but into habit. People obey not from fear alone, but from shared understanding. It keeps them whole. You wander toward the edge of the square where the stocks stand empty. A faint smell of wood and rain lingers. Someone has carved initials into the frame, perhaps a gesture of defiance or memory. You trace them lightly with your fingers and wonder how many have stood here before, enduring the sting of laughter and the relief of release. In towns and cities, justice grows more complex. Courtrooms hum with clerks and parchments. Judges quote Latin, and lawyers argue over meaning. But here, in the village, justice remains human, close enough to touch. It is spoken aloud, witnessed by all, sealed not by ink but by nods. Scholars still discuss whether this system was fair or fragile. It depended heavily on reputation, which could be destroyed by rumor or repaired by generosity. A man's word was his armor, a woman's honor her currency. Lies could wound more deeply than blades. Yet, in its imperfection, There was mercy, because mercy was familiar. As the sun climbs higher, the crowd fades. You hear a child laughing somewhere behind you, already forgetting the tension of the morning. Life resumes its rhythm. Carts creak, dogs bark, and the smell of baking bread drifts from a nearby window. The reeve leans on his staff, watching the square empty. He looks tired, but content. Peace, however fragile, has been maintained another day. You turn toward the path leading home. The air feels clearer now, as though the act of judgment has cleansed the village of something heavy. The bell in the church tower tolls once, marking the hour. Its sound rolls gently through the fields, steady and calm. Justice here is not perfect, you think, but it endures. It breathes through voices and glances, through shared memory and forgiveness. In the long pattern of medieval life, that may be the truest kind of order one made. Not of fear, but of faith in one another. The road out of the village stretches wide and uneven, lined with hedges heavy with dew. You step carefully around puddles, the air crisp against your cheeks. For most people here, travel is rare. To leave one's parish is to step into the unknown, a place where maps fade and rumour replaces fact. Yet for some, the urge to walk farther is irresistible. Pilgrims, traders, and wanderers move across the land like threads in a great tapestry, weaving connection between distant lives. You pass a small group of travellers walking slowly toward the sunrise. Their cloaks are dusty, their sandals worn thin. Each carries a staff and a small pouch tied at the waist. A cockle shell hangs from one man's hat, the symbol of pilgrimage to Santiago. Another wears a wooden cross around her neck, her face lined but peaceful. They greet you with a nod before continuing, the sound of their footsteps fading into the morning mist. A pilgrim's journey is both spiritual and practical. Some walk for penance, others for healing, others still for the thrill of the road itself. In a time when roads are rough and danger ever present, each mile is an act of faith. Inns and monasteries along the routes offer food and shelter. Their signs hang from poles carved with the image of a staff or a lantern, promising warmth to those who can pay or who can pray. Manuscripts from abbeys along the pilgrim roads describe how travellers were received. Monks washed their feet, offered bread, and listened to their stories. The road, in this way, became a shared language of devotion. To walk was to trust the kindness of strangers and the mercy of heaven. You imagine the long paths that crisscross Europe, muddy tracks through forests, narrow bridges over rivers, paths worn by centuries of feet. The journey is slow, guided not by compass but by memory and the shape of the land. Landmarks are sacred: an old oak, a stone cross, a stream where travellers rest. The air along these roads carries both fatigue and hope. A curious entry from a 14th century travel account describes the companionship of the road. A pilgrim alone will meet himself too often, the writer warns. Most prefer company, singing hymns together, sharing bread, and trading stories of saints and miracles. Even the act of walking becomes a kind of moving prayer, each step an offering. You meet a merchant next, his cart creaking beneath bolts of fabric and small barrels sealed with wax. His horse plods steadily, the animal's breath steaming in the cold air. He greets you cheerfully, proud of the goods he carries from the coast. Trade is his pilgrimage. He speaks of distant towns where salt glitters like treasure, where spices perfume the air, where language itself changes flavor. You listen, half in awe, half in envy. Historians studying medieval travel often note that merchants and pilgrims shared the same roads, but not the same reasons. For one, the reward was profit; for the other, salvation. Yet their paths intertwined. Markets grew around holy shrines, and relics drew both devotion and commerce. Faith and trade walked side by side, feeding one another. You reach a small bridge where water glimmers beneath moss-covered stones. A beggar sits nearby, his hands outstretched. Pilgrims drop coins into his palm as they pass. Charity is part of the journey, a way to lighten both purse and soul. He blesses each one softly, his voice low and rough. You watch as the pilgrims continue on, their cloaks fluttering in rhythm with the wind. A curious custom recorded by travelers tells that at the end of a pilgrimage, people carried back small tokens: a scallop shell from the coast, a vial of holy water, a sprig of rosemary. Some even brought dirt from sacred ground to sprinkle in their gardens. Faith, it seems, always seeks to root itself in home. By afternoon, the sky brightens. You walk beside a cart carrying barrels of ale bound for the next town. The driver hums an old tune, his voice mixing with the creak of wheels and the clatter of hooves. A pack of geese marches ahead, herded by a boy waving a stick. The sight makes you laugh. The road, for all its uncertainty, feels alive with stories. Researchers still puzzle over how people navigated such journeys without modern maps. Some followed river paths, others trusted waymarkers carved with symbols of saints or animals. Oral knowledge passed from traveller to traveller, a living guidebook. To be lost was common, but to be found again was part of the grace of the road. As dusk approaches, you see an inn ahead, its sign swinging in the wind. The smell of stew drifts through the door, and laughter spills out with the light. Inside, travellers sit shoulder to shoulder, trading tales over cups of ale. A minstrel strums softly in the corner, singing of cities far to the south. You take a seat near the fire, your legs aching but your heart light. An old man beside you speaks of Jerusalem, of roads paved with dust and lined with olive trees. He has never been, but his words make it real. Every traveller carries such dreams, half truth, half imagination, stitched together by longing. The world may be dangerous, but it is also endlessly wide. You fall silent, listening to the murmur of voices. The fire pops, a log collapsing into ember. Outside, the wind sighs through the trees, carrying the faint jingle of a pilgrim's bell. You close your eyes for a moment and picture the road stretching endlessly forward, full of strangers, stories, and unseen stars guiding the way. In this moment, you understand the quiet magic of travel here. To move is to believe that the world will welcome you, that each sunrise will bring new faces and new kindness. It is not escape, but connection, a thread between places and hearts. You finish your drink, feeling warmth spread through your chest, and whisper a small wish for safe passage to those still walking the road. By morning, the air feels different. The smell of wood smoke fades, replaced by the sharp tang of river water and the faint hum of voices rising in the distance. You follow the sound, and soon the road opens into a town alive with colour and noise. The gates stand wide, guarded by men in quilted armour who barely glance at you as you pass. Inside, the world shifts. The quiet rhythm of the village gives way to a new music. Wheels creaking, hawkers shouting, hammers ringing, children darting through alleys with bread in their hands. Cities in the Middle Ages are living contradictions. They smell of spice and sewage, of incense and fish. Streets twist and narrow, paved in places and muddy in others. Wooden houses lean inward, so close that the upper floors almost touch. Laundry hangs above like sails, fluttering in the wind. Beneath it all runs a steady undercurrent of motion and ambition. You walk through a market square already busy despite the early hour. A fishmonger shouts prices over the cries of gulls. A brewer pours ale into clay cups for dock workers, their laughter thick and rough. The air carries the scent of salt, yeast, and smoke. A woman selling candles dips wicks into melted tallow, the wax gleaming like gold in the light. Records from medieval cities describe this energy as both intoxicating and dangerous. Town life promises freedom from the manor's authority, a chance to earn by skill rather than birth. But it also demands endurance. Crowds, disease, and fire are constant threats. The same closeness that breeds community can also breed disaster. A curious entry from a city chronicle tells of night curfews marked by bells. When the sound rang through the streets, shops shuttered and torches dimmed. The gates closed soon after, locking both safety and fear within the walls. Yet behind those closed doors, another kind of life began. As the sun lowers, the city transforms. Lanterns flicker in windows, musicians take to the taverns, and laughter spills from open doors. Inside one of these dim rooms, the smell of roasted meat mingles with the sour sweetness of ale. Sailors swap stories of storms and mermaids. A scholar argues with a merchant about the price of ink. At a corner table, a woman reads fortunes with cards, her smile both inviting and dangerous. Historians often describe medieval nightlife as an escape from the day's rigid order. Here, for a few hours, class and duty blur. Apprentices drink beside their masters, and a beggar's joke earns more respect than a priest's sermon. The tavern becomes a small democracy of laughter and song. A curious note from a 15th century innkeeper's record lists the rules of his establishment. No knives drawn after the third cup, no gambling on saints' days, and no singing bawdy songs louder than the bell. The last rule, he wrote in jest, was broken every night. Outside, the streets glow faintly with torchlight. You follow the sound of music to a square where dancers spin in circles, skirts flashing in the fire's light. Drums pound, a fiddle weeps, and a boy with a tambourine keeps time. The air vibrates with rhythm, and even those who do not dance tap their feet. The smell of roasting chestnuts drifts from a nearby cart. You take one, the heat almost too much to hold, and bite into its sweetness. Somewhere nearby, a preacher stands on a crate, warning of sin and excess. His words are lost in the noise, swallowed by laughter. The contrast feels fitting. The city feeds both the body and the soul, though never in equal measure. You glance upward, where the church spire cuts the night sky, its shadow crossing the dancing crowd like a silent blessing or a quiet warning. Researchers studying urban life in the Middle Ages often highlight how these spaces of chaos created innovation. Guilds formed, knowledge spread, and ideas met one another in narrow streets. The blacksmith learned from the goldsmith, the mason from the architect, and the scribe from passing scholars. Cities, despite their filth and danger, became the beating hearts of progress. You wander deeper into the maze of alleys. The cobblestones are slick with rain and refuse, but the sound of laughter follows you. Behind a shutter, someone plays a lute. From another window, a woman's voice hums a lullaby. Life presses close on every side. You feel both small and strangely connected, part of something immense. A curious traveler once wrote that a city at night was like a living creature, its heartbeat measured in footsteps and bells. Walking through these streets, you can feel that pulse. Every whisper and clatter joins the rhythm, a reminder that humanity thrives even in its noise. You stop at the edge of the river, where the reflections of torches ripple across the water. Boats rock gently against the dock, their ropes creaking. The smell of tar and damp wood fills your lungs. The night feels infinite here, full of possibility and peril. You hear laughter behind you, a scuffle of boots, the faint clink of coins changing hands. Somewhere, someone is making a deal, a promise, or a mistake. The wind shifts, carrying the bells from the church tower again, marking the hour before midnight. The sound rolls through the air, blending with distant music and the murmur of water. You pull your cloak tighter, taking one last look at the glow of windows and the restless streets. Cities in this time are like dreams crowded, alive, fleeting. You can lose yourself easily, yet find something just as valuable, the sense of belonging to a great human story. As you turn away from the lights, the river whispering beside you, you realize that even in the dirt and danger, this world hums with beauty, as bright and brief as a spark in the dark. Morning breaks inside a quiet courtyard, where a single candle flickers beside a book left open through the night. You step closer, hearing the faint scratch of a quill across parchment. A young scholar sits bent over a desk, his ink-stained fingers moving carefully, his lips murmuring the words as he writes. The smell of parchment, ink, and wax fills the air. The sound is almost hypnotic. This is not a lord's hall or a merchant's home. It is a place of study, a small corner of a monastery, where thought itself is treated as sacred labor. The monk beside you pauses, blows gently on the page, and inspects the letters. They glisten briefly before drying. He smiles faintly, satisfied, and dips his pen again. Learning in the Middle Ages is a rare privilege. Most people never touch a book, yet its influence shapes even those who cannot read. From scriptoria like this one, knowledge flows outward in letters, sermons, and songs. Each page is a world of its own. A single manuscript might take months or even years to complete, its creation an act of patience bordering on devotion. A monastic record from the Abbey of St. Gall describes the rules of the scriptorium. Silence must be kept at all times. Scribes may speak only in signs. A raised hand for ink, 2 fingers for parchment. To waste material is a sin. To fall asleep is worse. The words they copy are not just texts but living prayers, and each stroke of the pen honors the divine. You watch as another monk mixes pigments for illumination. He grinds minerals into powder, adds water and egg white, then stirs with care. Gold leaf rests nearby, ready to be pressed onto the page. The results shimmer even in dim light. A single initial letter can glow like a star, framed by curling vines and tiny beasts. For most people, these books will never be seen. Yet still they are made, proof that beauty has value even when hidden. A curious note found in a scholar's diary reveals the hazards of this work. The ink freezes, my fingers ache, and the candle gutters, he writes. Yet to copy one word wrongly is to lose my soul. You picture him huddled in his cloak, breath misting in the cold, still writing because truth itself feels worth the discomfort. Outside the monastery walls, learning takes new forms. Universities are beginning to rise in towns like Bologna, Paris, and Oxford. Their students, mostly young men from across Europe, fill the streets with noise and arguments. They study grammar, logic, medicine, and law, debating endlessly in taverns and courtyards. Knowledge, for the first time, begins to belong not only to the church, but to the restless human mind. Researchers tracing these early universities describe a mixture of chaos and brilliance. Classes might be held in borrowed rooms, students sleeping 3 to a bed, surviving on bread and beer. Yet within those cramped spaces, ideas bloom that will one day reshape the world. The notion that reason can explore faith, that science can coexist with spirit, begins here, in these voices raised in Latin and laughter. You find a young scholar outside, sitting by a fountain, his notes spread across his knees. His eyes are tired but shining. He explains that he studies medicine, hoping to heal both bodies and souls. His books are precious, copied by hand and shared between students. When he speaks of anatomy, his tone is reverent, as though describing a mystery rather than a mechanism. You sense that curiosity itself has become a kind of prayer. A curious little story from Oxford tells of a student fined for keeping an owl in his room, claiming it helped him stay awake during study. The officials disapproved, but the tale survived because it captured the strange mixture of dedication and humor that defines these places of learning. Even the pursuit of wisdom needs laughter to survive. As the afternoon light softens, the monastery bell rings, calling the monks to prayer. The scholars in town pause their debates, and for a moment, thought and faith move together. You follow the sound into the chapel, where the smell of ink gives way to the fragrance of incense. The chanting rises, filling the stone vaults. The voices move in unison, neither loud nor timid, simply steady. Historians still discuss whether medieval education served control or enlightenment. Did it bind the mind to obedience, or did it open it to wonder? Perhaps it did both. The same hands that copied scripture also preserved forgotten poetry and philosophy. The same schools that taught doctrine also produced dreamers who questioned it. Knowledge here grows like ivy, finding cracks and reaching upward toward light. When night falls, you step outside into the courtyard again. The air is cool, and the stars glitter above the roofline. A faint glow spills from the scriptorium window. Inside, the young monk still writes, his quill moving in slow rhythm. He does not see you, and you do not disturb him. You realize that what he copies tonight may outlast his lifetime. The ink may fade, the parchment crack, but the words will continue, passed from hand to hand, heart to heart. The quiet labor of thought is its own form of faith, just as sacred as the chanting of prayers. You turn toward the gate, your steps soft on the stone. Behind you, the sound of quills scratching blends with the wind in the cloister garden. The candle in the window flickers once, then steadies. Somewhere in the dark, a page turns, and another thought begins its slow journey into eternity. By dawn, the bells are already ringing, but this time not for work or prayer. Their sound rolls through the village with a different rhythm, lighter, faster, full of promise. You step outside into cool air that smells of roasting meat, trampled grass, and sweet ale. The square ahead of you has transformed overnight. Banners flutter from wooden poles. Tables groan under baskets of bread and wheels of cheese. The people move with unusual ease, faces bright, voices quick. Today is a feast day. Festivals in the Middle Ages are islands of joy in a sea of labor. They break the pattern of toil, giving permission to laugh, to sing, to forget. Every season carries its own celebrations. Harvest, midwinter, midsummer, saints' days, weddings, and fairs. The church calls them holy days, but the villagers know them as moments of relief, when the burdens of work and hunger can rest. You walk among the stalls where merchants sell ribbons, bells, and little trinkets carved from bone. Children dart through the crowd, chasing one another with handfuls of flowers. The sound of a drum draws your attention toward a circle forming near the center. A troupe of jugglers performs, their colored balls flashing in the sunlight. A woman with painted cheeks balances a hoop on her fingertips while a man plays a lively tune on a pipe. The crowd cheers, coins clinking into a hat. Chronicles from the time describe how these fairs were both marketplace and theater. You could buy spices, wool, candles, or hear songs and gossip from towns far away. Pilgrims and thieves walked the same roads to reach them. News spread faster at a festival than through any messenger, and secrets often followed it home. A curious record from a French village mentions that some fairs grew so large that they needed temporary laws. Taverns could not raise prices more than twice their usual rate. Gambling was forbidden, though everyone ignored the rule. Even the clergy often looked the other way, aware that joy itself was a kind of prayer. You stop near a table where a baker sells honey cakes shaped like animals. The smell makes your mouth water. You buy one and take a bite. It is warm and soft, the honey seeping through your fingers. Nearby, musicians begin to play again, fiddles, flutes, and hand drums, weaving into a rhythm that makes your feet move before your mind agrees. People join hands, circling in a dance that feels endless. Laughter ripples like wind through the crowd. Researchers who study medieval celebrations often point out that such days carried layers of meaning. They honored saints, marked agricultural milestones, and strengthened social ties. But beneath all that, they offered something simpler: release. In a world where most lives were short and hard, celebration became survival. It reminded people that even laboring souls deserved beauty. A storyteller stands by the well, gathering listeners with a booming voice. His tale is half history, half fantasy, about a knight who outwitted the devil using nothing but wit and a loaf of bread. The audience laughs in all the right places. Children clinging to their mothers, old men nodding at familiar morals. When he finishes, a small girl steps forward and hands him a flower. The gesture earns a cheer. The story, like the feast, will live in memory long after the day fades. You notice a group of women preparing for a custom older than anyone remembers. They weave garlands of herbs and toss them into the fire pit, saying it brings luck for the coming year. Some claim the smoke carries prayers to heaven. Others say it simply smells sweet. Either way, everyone leans closer as the flames rise, sparks spiraling upward like tiny stars. One chronicle from the Low Countries describes midsummer fires that burned through the night, their glow visible from miles away. People danced until sunrise, their shadows flickering on the ground. The church tried to reshape these rituals into Christian forms, but the heart of them stayed pagan at its core. Gratitude for warmth, for crops, for life itself. A curious superstition surrounds these feast days. In some villages it was said that if you spilled ale on the ground before drinking, you shared your luck with the earth. Others believed that dancing through smoke could cure melancholy. Such customs blur the line between faith and fun, yet perhaps that is their power. The afternoon rolls into laughter and song. You watch a mock tournament where young men with wooden swords clash in friendly competition. Dust flies, shouts echo, and when one victor lifts his blade in triumph, a group of girls crown him with a wreath of flowers. The whole crowd applauds, and for a moment, the line between lord and peasant dissolves completely. Researchers still debate whether these festivals served as true freedom or controlled escape, a way for rulers and priests to let people release frustration safely. Perhaps both. But as you look around, you cannot deny the joy. It is in every grin, every hand clap, every shared drink. Freedom may be fleeting, but it exists in the moment people forget to measure it. As dusk approaches, torches are lit, and the music softens. The last light fades, turning faces to silhouettes. Couples slip away toward the fields, laughter trailing behind. The air smells of smoke and grass. The embers in the fire pit glow like captured suns. You sit near the edge of the square, tired but content. The honey still lingers on your tongue. A musician strums the final notes of the evening, slow and gentle, a tune that seems to cradle the world in its rhythm. People begin to leave, their footsteps fading into the dark. When the last torch gutters out, the silence feels sacred. You can still sense the laughter in the air, as if it has soaked into the earth itself. Tomorrow will bring work again, but tonight, the village has remembered what it means to be alive together. You close your eyes and let that memory settle, warm and glowing, like the last spark of the feast. Morning comes quietly after the feast. The fields glisten with dew, and the air feels almost new, as though laughter itself has washed the world clean. You walk along the lane and notice charms hanging from doorways, bundles of herbs tied with ribbon, tiny carved figures, and coins pressed into cracks of wood. The festival is over, but its magic lingers. In the medieval mind, the unseen is never far away. Every gust of wind, every creak in the rafters, every sudden chill carries meaning. To live in this world is to believe that mystery moves beside you. Some call it superstition, others call it wisdom. Whatever name you give it, it shapes how people breathe and hope. A farmer waves to you from his gate. Around his neck hangs a small amulet carved from bone, a charm against illness in the livestock. He touches it gently as he speaks, then returns to his work. Faith and fear share the same home here. You pass another cottage where a woman sprinkles salt across her doorstep. When she notices you, she smiles and says it keeps away envy. You nod, though she adds quietly that it works better if done at sunrise. Old writings found in parish records tell of these small rituals performed in every household. Salt to guard against evil, iron to block spirits, rosemary for remembrance, breadcrumbs for blessing. People live surrounded by small protections, woven into their routines like invisible prayers. They are not grand gestures but habits of care, ways to make sense of what cannot be controlled. You hear the clanging of a blacksmith's hammer and follow the sound to his forge. On the wall above his work hangs a horseshoe, polished bright. He catches your eye and laughs. "Luck sticks where iron sleeps," he says, repeating an old saying. His words ring half in jest, half in belief. In this world, doubt and devotion walk hand in hand. A curious passage in a monk's notebook describes how villagers sometimes carried holy relics alongside pagan charms, hedging their faith in both directions. A piece of a saint's bone in one pocket, a sprig of mistletoe in the other. To modern eyes, the mixture seems contradictory, yet to them, It was harmony, a blending of heaven and earth. At the edge of the village, an old woman kneels beside a small patch of herbs. She whispers softly while tying red thread around a bundle of thyme. Children say she knows charms that cure fever or keep nightmares away. Some call her wise, others whisper witch under their breath. You watch her work carefully, her movements deliberate and calm. Whatever she is, her knowledge comes from listening to the land itself. Researchers who study medieval folklore still argue over how much fear shaped these practices. Were they remnants of older religions, or simply comfort disguised as magic? The line between faith and superstition is thin, and perhaps it always has been. When a prayer fails, a charm might still bring peace, even if only in the heart. You walk toward the churchyard where small tokens hang from the branches of an old yew tree. Strips of cloth, beads, coins pressed into the bark. Each one left by someone seeking a favor, healing, luck, or forgiveness. The wind moves through the branches, making the cloth sway as though the tree itself is breathing. It feels alive with memory. A curious story recorded in a rural chronicle tells that trees like this were sometimes seen as gateways between worlds. People left offerings for the souls of the departed, believing the wind carried their words to the other side. The church frowned on such customs, but often tolerated them quietly, knowing that faith cannot always be contained within walls. As the afternoon light fades, a storm gathers on the horizon. The villagers hurry to bring animals indoors, and shutters close with soft thuds. You find shelter near the tavern porch. The sky turns a bruised grey, the air heavy with rain. Lightning flashes once, illuminating the cottages, then thunder follows like a drumbeat. Someone nearby crosses themselves. Someone else murmurs an old rhyme to calm the storm's anger. Both actions feel right. The rain comes hard, rattling against the roofs. For a moment, the world feels small, enclosed by sound. The smell of wet earth fills your lungs. You think about how belief, in all its forms, protects the mind from chaos. Whether through prayer, charm, or simple habit, people find ways to anchor themselves when the wind rises. When the storm finally passes, the air is clean and cool. A rainbow arches faintly over the fields, and the smell of rain lingers. Villagers step outside, shaking out cloaks and laughing softly, relief written across their faces. A small boy points to the rainbow, shouting that it means good fortune for the harvest. His grandmother nods solemnly, as if to confirm it. Scholars still wonder how much of medieval superstition was imagination and how much was inherited truth. They find remnants of charms, scratched symbols on doorframes, coins buried beneath thresholds. Each tells the same story. People believed their world listened to them. Perhaps that belief, more than any magic, gave them strength. You walk back toward the fields, where puddles glint in the setting sunday. The ground is soft beneath your boots, the air humming faintly with insects awakened by the rain. A faint smell of thyme drifts from the old woman's garden. She stands there still, watching the sky with quiet satisfaction. The day ends in calm. The clouds drift away. The last light glows gold across the wet grass. And for a moment, the entire village seems suspended between heaven and earth. You understand then why people fill their lives with charms and signs. In a world ruled by uncertainty, belief is not foolishness, it is a kind of courage, the choice to trust that meaning hides even in the smallest things. The air this morning feels heavy with mist, the kind that softens sound and blurs distance. You walk toward the edge of the fields where the land opens into rolling meadows. The world smells of wet earth and wood smoke, of something green and ancient. Here, nature rules every breath of life. The weather decides the rhythm of work, and the seasons write the calendar long before any priest or scholar. A farmer passes you on the path, his boots thick with mud. He tips his cap and glances toward the horizon where clouds gather in slow procession. Rain before noon, he mutters. Sun by supper. His certainty is born of years spent watching the sky. No almanac could tell him more than the tilt of a crow's wing or the whisper of wind through barley. In this world, the weather is both friend and tyrant. A good season means survival. A bad one means hunger. Every sunrise is a negotiation between hope and fear. You can almost feel it in the soil under your feet, the pulse of a living world that gives and takes without warning. A record from an English manor mentions how peasants watched the behavior of swallows to predict storms. If they flew low, rain was near. If they soared high, the skies would stay clear. Another note says that thunder in winter was an omen of disease. Whether true or not, these signs became language, an ancient conversation between people and the sky. The year turns like a wheel, each part carrying its own tone. Spring bursts open with soft green shoots and lambs calling from the hills. Summer brings heat, buzzing flies, and long hours in the fields. Autumn smells of smoke and harvest, sweet and smoky. Winter presses close with frost and silence, the nights long enough for stories to grow inside them. You walk through the meadow where wildflowers nod in the light breeze. Bees hum lazily from bloom to bloom, their sound low and steady, the sound of peace. The grass brushes your legs, still damp from dawn. The rhythm of this landscape feels eternal, as though it remembers every footstep ever taken. A curious passage from a medieval herbal describes weather as divine mood. Rain is mercy, wind is warning, frost is discipline. Farmers prayed not for wealth, but for balance, a season kind enough to feed, harsh enough to remind them of humility. When crops failed, people gathered in the churchyard to beg for relief, candles held high against darkening skies. You reach the river that curves behind the village. Its current glides smooth, reflecting the pale morning light. A fisherman stands knee-deep in the water, his line drawn taut. He nods to you without speaking. The splash of his catch echoes softly. For him, the river is both larder and prayer. The day's fortune depends on its mood. Researchers studying medieval life often remark that people's connection to nature went beyond survival. It was spiritual. Every breeze carried meaning, every tree whispered of endurance. Even sickness and health were explained by the balance between human body and natural order. The world was not separate from the self. It was part of one great pattern. A curious tale from the Low Countries tells of villagers ringing church bells during storms to scatter the clouds. They believed the sound could frighten demons hidden in thunder. Records show entire towers shaken by these efforts, their bells booming across the countryside while lightning flared above. Whether the storms obeyed or not, people found comfort in the noise. By midday, the clouds begin to lift. The light spreads slowly, washing over the fields until everything shines. Workers move through the rows of grain, bending and rising like the rhythm of a tide. You hear their voices faintly, songs half lost in the wind. The tune is old, simple, and strangely beautiful. It speaks of weather turning kind, of soil answering prayer. You stop beside a small copse of trees where moss carpets the roots and the air feels cooler. Somewhere above, a thrush sings a melody so pure it silences the world around it. You close your eyes and listen. It is easy to understand why people once believed that birds carried messages from heaven. Scholars still wonder how people in this age endured the constant uncertainty of climate. They faced drought, flood, frost, and famine, yet their songs praise the beauty of dawn and rain alike. Perhaps they understood something modern hearts forget, that control is an illusion but wonder is a choice. As evening comes, the air thickens with the scent of cut hay. The sun sinks low, painting the sky in soft gold and violet. Villagers finish their work and stand for a moment, watching the light fade. The sound of crickets rises. The first cool breath of night moves across the fields, brushing your skin. You walk back along the river, the water catching the last of the color before turning silver in the dusk. A thin mist gathers again, curling low across the grass. The horizon blurs into dream. For a moment the world feels weightless, as if breathing in its sleep. You pause, looking at the darkening sky. The first star appears, faint but certain. It feels like a promise whispered to anyone still awake to see it. The night will come, and the morning after it, and the wheel will keep turning. In the rhythm of wind and rain, in the song of fields and birds, life keeps its quiet vow to begin again. Evening gathers over the village like a soft cloak. The fields fade into blue shadow, and a single curl of smoke rises from each chimney. You walk slowly through the narrow lane, the ground cool beneath your feet, the air alive with small sounds, the cluck of hens settling in their coop, the creak of a gate, the whisper of wind in thatch. The day's labour is done, and the world exhales. From an open doorway, a faint glow spills onto the road. Inside, a family sits close around the hearth. You pause to listen. The father's voice is low, the mother's laughter quick and gentle. A child hums softly as she stirs a pot with a wooden spoon. The smell of lentils and onions fills the air. You close your eyes and breathe it in. It smells like peace. Evening in the Middle Ages is not silent, but softer, slower. The danger of the day has passed, and the noise of work has quieted into rhythm. Pots clatter gently. Fire crackles. Somewhere, a cow moos from the byre, answered by a dog's half-hearted bark. It is the sound of rest disguised as motion. A record from a manor household describes the curfew bell, rung each night as a signal for villagers to bank their fires and close their shutters. The name comes from the French couvre-feu, meaning cover the fire. In a world of wooden homes and open flames, one careless ember could swallow a village. The bell was both command and comfort, safety sealed into sound. You step into your own cottage. The firelight flickers across the rough walls. Shadows dance like old ghosts, familiar but harmless. The bench creaks as you sit. You take off your boots, rub the stiffness from your feet, and stretch your legs toward the warmth. The air carries the faint scent of ash, wool, and earth. You can feel the day lifting from your shoulders, replaced by something gentler. A curious note from a pilgrim's journal mentions that travelers often judged a village by its evening fires. A hearth seen from the road, he wrote, is a promise of bread. You think of that now, of how the glow of a single flame can make strangers feel less alone. Even here, where life is rough and simple, light is a kind of language. Outside, the last of the sun slips behind the trees. A boy runs down the lane with a bundle of sticks for kindling. His sister chases him, shouting his name, her laughter cutting the quiet in two. The sound fades, replaced by the sigh of a lute from somewhere near the square. Someone plays for the sheer joy of sound. No audience needed. The notes drift like smoke through the air. Researchers studying medieval domestic life often describe evenings as the time when a household turned inward. After hours of labor, people mended, spun, cooked, or simply talked. Tasks were still performed, but gently, without haste. Children learned songs or prayers by firelight. Old stories were retold until the listeners could finish each sentence themselves. A small chronicle from Florence mentions how families often kept a single candle burning through supper, placed at the table's center. It symbolized unity, a circle of light against the darkness. When it burned low, the youngest child was allowed to pinch it out, a small ritual that marked the day's end. You imagine the soft hush that must have followed, the rustle of blankets, the whisper of good night. You lean back and listen to the night building outside. The crickets sing their patient tune, joined by the distant call of an owl. The air cools, brushing your face through the open window. A faint drizzle begins, tapping lightly against the roof. Each drop feels like punctuation at the end of a long sentence. Inside, the fire sighs and collapses inward. You stir it once, watching the sparks rise like tiny worlds. For a moment, you think of all the other fires burning across the land, every cottage, every hearth, every family folded into its own circle of warmth. It feels like the entire world breathes together. A curious belief from an old parish record says that firelight at night could attract wandering souls if left unattended. To guard against it, people would draw a small cross in the ashes before sleeping. Whether superstition or comfort, the gesture carried tenderness, as if even the unseen deserved kindness. You find yourself tracing the same small mark with your finger before you realize what you're doing. Outside, the rain stops. The sky clears enough for stars to appear, scattered and distant. Through the window, you can see the moon rising above the thatched roofs, pale and enormous. Its reflection trembles faintly in puddles on the road. You hear a door creak somewhere, then close softly again. The village settles into stillness. You lie down on your straw mattress, the smell of smoke still clinging to your clothes. The faint hum of the world continues. The wind, the owl, the slow breathing of someone asleep nearby. Your eyelids grow heavy, and you think of how evening here feels less like an ending and more like a pause before another beginning. Tomorrow will come with its noise and labor, its prayers and chores, but for now, the night holds you. The quiet feels deep enough to rest inside. You close your eyes and let the darkness fold over you like a blanket warmed by centuries of peace. Night has fully arrived. The village lies beneath a sky so clear it feels endless, the stars burning with the calm certainty of old fires. You open your eyes to the faint orange glow of the dying hearth, its warmth fading in slow waves. The room smells of ash, wool, and the faint sweetness of dried herbs hanging from the rafters. A single candle flickers beside you, its flame small and steady. Everything is still, yet alive. Outside, the world sleeps in layers. The animals settle in their stalls, the hens tucked beneath their feathers, the cows shifting in slow dreams. The dog sighs once by the door, curling tighter into the straw. Beyond the cottages, the fields stretch out like dark oceans, glimmering with frost. You listen and hear the soft chorus of crickets, a lullaby shaped by the land itself. Sleep in the Middle Ages follows the rhythm of the night rather than the clock. People rest in two parts. The first sleep begins soon after dark, deep and heavy. Then comes the watch, the quiet hour between midnight and dawn, when the body wakes gently. Some use it for prayer, others for conversation or small chores, and some simply lie still, listening to the dark. Then the second sleep carries them back into dreams until the morning bell calls. A record from a Benedictine monastery describes these hours as sacred. The monks would rise to chant before returning to their beds, believing the soul listened best when the world was silent. In villages, the same hour feels more personal. A mother checks on her child. A farmer stirs the fire. A traveller whispers a prayer for the road ahead. The night belongs to reflection, not fear. You turn over on the straw mattress, the sound of the wind brushing the window shutters. The blanket is rough, but warm, heavy enough to pin you into comfort. You feel every thread of it, every uneven patch where someone mended it long ago. The weight is reassuring, like a reminder that even worn things can last. A curious entry from a medieval household guide describes simple ways to ensure good sleep. Fill the bed with sweet herbs like lavender or mint to keep away fleas, and place a sprig of rosemary beneath the pillow to guard against bad dreams. You can almost smell the faint echo of those herbs even now, their scent mingling with the smoke and the earth. Dreams are not idle here. People believe they hold messages. Some say they come from angels, others from wandering spirits. A shoemaker's wife once recorded a dream of a field of golden wheat before her husband found unexpected work at the harvest. Such coincidences keep belief alive. A dream can be prophecy or comfort, warning or wish. Researchers studying sleep patterns in the past remark on how darkness shaped imagination. Without artificial light, the world of dreams began earlier and ended later. The line between waking and sleeping blurred. For those who lived without distraction, the quiet hours opened space for wonder. Night became its own kind of education. Outside, an owl hoots from the woods, its cry clear and low. Somewhere far off, a church bell strikes once. The the sound drifting like a sigh across the fields. The candle beside you trembles, its flame shrinking before settling again. You pull the blanket closer, feeling the slow rhythm of your heartbeat match the hush of the room. A curious superstition says that souls travel while we sleep, wandering the roads of heaven and memory. To wake someone too suddenly was to risk pulling their spirit back too fast. You think of this as your eyes grow heavy. Perhaps the soul does travel at night, visiting places it has loved, walking old paths beneath silent stars. The air cools. You can almost taste the damp edge of dawn far away on the horizon, yet the world remains still. The fire is only embers now, a faint red glow breathing in the dark. The smell of it wraps around you like a story you have heard 100 times but still wish to hear again. You let your mind drift. Faces from the day return, the baker smiling as he handed you bread, the children laughing by the pond, the healer grinding herbs in her small room. They appear not as memories but as companions, gathered in this shared quiet that belongs to every sleeper across time. Sleep gathers softly, like the tide creeping up the sand. You breathe in and out, slower each time. Outside, frost settles on the thatch, glistening faintly in the starlight. Somewhere a rooster stirs, confused by the moon, and then quiets again. The night holds you completely now. The village, the fields, the stars, they merge into one vast hush. You feel yourself fading into that silence, peaceful and weightless, a part of the rhythm that has guided so many before you. And as your thoughts slip further from words, you realize something simple. The Middle Ages were not only toil and faith, hunger and fear. They were also this: the warmth of a small fire, the quiet promise of sleep, the endless patience of night. The world breathes slowly, and you breathe with it. The stars fade first, paling like whispers against the soft bloom of dawn. A thread of gold begins to trace the horizon. The frost glows faintly on the fields, and the first bird calls out, a single note that wakes the world. You open your eyes for a moment, then close them again, unwilling to let go of the peace that still hums around you. The hearth beside you is cold, but its ashes hold memory. You can almost hear last night's laughter, smell the bread, feel the weight of the blanket tucked around you. The village is quiet, caught between sleep and waking. Even the air feels gentle, as if the world is careful not to disturb its own dream. Take a long breath and let it settle. Imagine the fields beyond the window, damp with dew, waiting patiently for footsteps that will soon return. The cycle will begin again: work, laughter, song, faith, and rest. But for now, you are allowed to linger here in the stillness. Let the quiet gather around you like soft wool. Let the images fade one by one: the smoke, the fire, the distant bell, the stars. What remains is calm. What remains is the hum of life, steady and eternal. The medieval night, full of sound and silence, folds itself into your heartbeat. The story ends here, but the peace stays. Sleep well, traveler. Tomorrow waits patiently, but tonight, the world belongs entirely to your dreams.